Emma Clark's scream echoed through the Red Rock Saloon as rough hands grabbed her waist. But it was the steel-cold voice that followed that changed everything. Touch her again, and you'll lose more than your hand. The richest, most dangerous rancher in Texas had just claimed her with 5 words, igniting a scandal that would burn down her old life and forge a new one. This is the story of a virgin saloon girl and the widowed cowboy who didn't rescue her. He chose her. Stay until the end and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The September heat hung over Red Rock, Texas like a wool blanket soaked in whiskey. Dust devils danced down Main Street, spinning past the general store, the blacksmith's forge, and the First Baptist Church before settling on the warped wooden steps of the Lucky Dollar Saloon. Inside, the air was thick with cigar smoke, cheap perfume, and the particular brand of desperation that comes with men who work too hard for too little. Emma Clark moved through that haze like a ghost trying to prove she was real. At 19, she'd already learned to make herself small, shoulders curved inward, eyes down, voice barely above a whisper. Her calico dress, faded from too many washings, hung loose on her thin frame. She'd owned 3 dresses in her life. This was the one that didn't have holes. Her dark hair, pulled back in a severe bun, occasionally released rebellious strands that framed a face pretty enough to be dangerous in a town like this, but tired enough to suggest she knew it. "Emma, table 7 needs whiskey, and don't you dare water it down again," Sal McCready's voice cut through the piano music like a rusty saw. The saloon owner stood behind his bar, all 300 pounds of him stuffed into a vest that had given up the fight against his belly years ago. His face was the color of undercooked beef, perpetually sweating, perpetually angry. "Yes, Mr. McCready," Emma murmured, reaching for the bottle with hands that had learned not to shake in public anymore. She'd been working at the Lucky Dollar for 8 months, ever since her father died and left her with nothing but debts and a reputation for being the daughter of the town drunk. Her mother had passed when Emma was 12, leaving behind only a cameo brooch and a Bible with her name written inside. The brooch was long gone, sold for food. The Bible she kept under her pillow in the tiny room above the saloon where Sal let her sleep in exchange for working double shifts. The cowboys at table 7 were in high spirits, flush with pay from the Johnson Ranch. They'd been drinking since sundown, and the sun had set 3 hours ago. "Well, well, looky here," drawled a man Emma recognized as Jake Morrison, a drover with a reputation for being handy with both a rope and his fists. "Little Emma Clark, Red Rock's very own angel of mercy. Ain't you gonna smile for us, darlin'?" Emma set down the glasses with practiced efficiency, her expression carefully neutral. "Anything else, gentlemen?" "Gentlemen!" Jake slapped the table, making the glasses jump. "You hear that, boys? She called us gentlemen." His companions laughed, the sound ugly and familiar. "My mama would be so proud." Emma turned to leave, but Jake's hand shot out, fingers wrapping around her wrist. Not hard enough to hurt. Men like Jake knew exactly how much pressure to apply to avoid leaving marks that might cause trouble. "Now hold on there, Angel. We ain't done admiring you yet." "Please let me go." Emma's voice stayed level, but her heart was hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. "Mr. McCready needs me at the bar." "Sal can wait." Jake pulled her closer, and Emma caught the sour smell of whiskey on his breath. "You know what I heard? I heard that the only reason you work here is 'cause you ain't got no other talents to speak of. That true?" One of the other cowboys, a younger man with pockmarked cheeks, snickered. "I heard different. I heard she's got talents, just ain't willing to share 'em. Thinks she's too good for honest working men." "That's so." Jake's grip tightened fractionally. "Well, maybe someone ought to teach her about being neighborly." The saloon doors swung open. The sound wasn't particularly loud, but something in the way those doors moved, steady, purposeful, inevitable, made conversation stutter and die like candles in a draft. The piano player's fingers stumbled over the keys before finding their rhythm again, softer now, cautious. Emma felt Jake's hand loosen on her wrist, felt the sudden tension ripple through the room like a stone dropped in still water. She turned. Colton Hayes stood in the doorway. Emma had seen him before, of course. Everyone in Red Rock had seen Colton Hayes. You didn't live in this county without knowing about the man who owned the largest ranch, the most cattle, the finest horses, and, according to whispered gossip, the coldest heart in Texas. But seeing him from across the street as his carriage passed was different from this. He was tall, over 6 feet, with shoulders broad enough to block the doorway completely. His black hat shadowed a face that could have been carved from the same granite that jutted up from his ranch land, all hard angles and unforgiving planes. A scar ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, a pale line that somehow made him more intimidating rather than less. His eyes, when they swept the room, were the color of storm clouds before lightning struck. He was 35, Emma knew, a widower for 5 years, a man who'd built an empire with nothing but will and work, who'd survived Indian raids, droughts, and the kind of winters that broke lesser men. A man who was rumored to have killed 3 men in a single gunfight in Abilene, though no one knew if it was true because no one was fool enough to ask. He dressed like money, but wore it like armor. Black pants, black vest over a crisp white shirt, a silver watch chain catching the lamplight. His boots, hand-tooled leather, barely made a sound as he crossed the scarred wooden floor. Every eye in the saloon followed him. Colton walked to the bar without acknowledging the room's attention, though Emma sensed he was aware of every person, every breath, every heartbeat within these walls. Sal McCready practically tripped over himself hurrying over. "Mr. Hayes, what an honor, sir. What can I get for you? Whiskey? We got a special bottle I've been saving." "Whiskey's fine." Colton's voice was deep, quiet, and absolutely clear despite the noise. "The regular." Of course, of course." Sal poured with shaking hands, slopping a bit over the rim. "On the house, naturally. I pay for my drinks." Colton placed coins on the bar. Exact change. His eyes hadn't left the mirror behind the bar, Emma realized. He could see the entire room reflected there, including table 7. Including her. Jake Morrison's hand was still on her wrist, though his grip had gone slack. He cleared his throat. "Well now, Emma, I suppose you better get back to—" "Touch her again," Colton said, not turning around, his voice carrying effortlessly through the room, "and you'll lose more than your hand." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the piano had stopped. Emma felt Jake's fingers release her, as if she'd suddenly caught fire. She pulled her hand back, cradling it against her chest, and found herself frozen between the table of cowboys and the bar where Colton Hayes stood, like a judge pronouncing sentence. "Mr. Hayes, sir," Jake stammered, finding his voice. "I didn't mean no disrespect. We was just having a bit of fun. Fun!" Colton finally turned, and Emma saw his face fully for the first time. There was no anger there, no passion at all, just a cold, absolute certainty that made Jake's explanation die in his throat. "That what you call it? She ain't nothing but a saloon girl, Mr. Hayes. We didn't think—" "No." Colton picked up his whiskey, examined it against the lamplight. "You didn't think? That's your problem, Morrison. That's always been your problem." He drank, set the glass down with a soft click. "You're fired. Be off my land by sunrise." The words landed like physical blows. Jake's face went from red to white. "But Mr. Hayes, I've worked for you for 3 years. I got nowhere to—" "You should have thought of that before you put your hands on Miss Clark." Miss Clark. Emma's mind stumbled over the title. No one had called her Miss anything in 8 months. Most people just called her girl or didn't call her anything at all. "It ain't fair!" Jake was on his feet now, desperation making him brave or stupid. "You can't fire a man over some nobody saloon girl. She ain't worth—" Colton moved. Emma didn't see how he crossed the distance. One moment he was at the bar, the next he was standing in front of Jake Morrison, close enough that the cowboy had to crane his neck back to meet his eyes. "Finish that sentence," Colton said softly. "And I'll finish you." Jake's companions had melted away from the table like snow in July. Smart men. Jake himself seemed to be reconsidering every choice that had brought him to this moment. I apologize, Mr. Hayes. I'll pack my things tonight." "See that you do." Colton stepped back, straightened his vest with deliberate care. Then his gaze shifted to Emma, and for the first time she found herself looking directly into those storm cloud eyes. "Miss Clark, are you hurt?" Emma's voice had abandoned her completely. She shook her head, mute. Something flickered across Colton's face, too quick to read, gone before she could name it. He gave her a single nod, tipped his hat with old-world courtesy that seemed impossible coming from a man who'd just threatened another man's life, and walked back to the bar. He finished his whiskey in silence, paid Sal McCready for a full bottle to take with him, and left the same way he'd entered, steady, purposeful, inevitable. The doors swung shut behind him. For 3 heartbeats, the silence held. Then the saloon exploded into noise, everyone talking at once, voices overlapping in a chaos of speculation and gossip. Emma stood frozen, her wrist still tingling where Jake had grabbed it, her mind replaying those 5 words. Touch her again, and you'll lose more than your hand. Sal McCready was at her elbow, his fat fingers digging into her arm. Well, 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 ain't you just full of surprises, girl? His breath was hot and sour in her face. What'd you do to catch Colton Hayes' eye, Been sneaking around his ranch? Batting those big eyes at him in town? I've never even spoken to him, Emma whispered. Don't matter what you done. Sal's grip tightened. What matters is what people will think you done. And that girl is going to be very bad for business. He shoved her toward the back of the saloon. Get to the kitchen. I don't want to see your face for the rest of the night. Emma fled, grateful for the dismissal, and pushed through the kitchen door into the marginally cooler space where old Martha Wilson was scrubbing pots. Martha looked up, her weathered face creased with concern. Heard the commotion. You all right, child? I don't know, Emma said honestly. She sank onto a stool, her legs suddenly unreliable. I don't know what just happened. Martha dried her hands on her apron, studying Emma with the shrewd eyes of a woman who'd seen 70 years of human foolishness. I'll tell you what happened. The most powerful man in the county just publicly claimed you under his protection, whether you wanted it or not. Claimed me? Emma's stomach lurched. No, he was being decent, that's all. He saw Jake bothering me and, honey, Martha's voice was gentle but firm. Colton Hayes doesn't do nothing without reason. He's been coming to this saloon every Saturday night for 5 years, and he ain't never said a word to nobody, just drinks his whiskey and leaves. But tonight he fired a man over you. You think this town's gonna see that as just being decent? Emma's hands were shaking now. She pressed them flat against her thighs, trying to stop the tremors. What will they think? They'll think what they always think when a powerful man notices a poor girl. They'll think you're his kept woman, his mistress, his plaything. Martha sat down heavily across from her. And they'll treat you accordingly. But I've never even spoken to him. I swear it, Martha, on my mother's grave. I believe you, child, but believing in what this town will say are 2 different things entirely. Martha reached across the table, covered Emma's trembling hands with her own gnarled ones. You best prepare yourself. Come tomorrow, Red Rock's going to be talking about nothing else. Martha was right. By Sunday morning, the gossip had spread like wildfire through the town. Emma heard it in whispers outside the church. She was too afraid to enter, caught fragments of it from her window above the saloon, saw it in the eyes of every person who looked at her. Did you hear about Emma Clark and Colton Hayes? She must have been meeting him in secret. Poor girl's finally found a protector. Though what he wants with skinny little thing like her, mark my words, she'll be set up in a house in Abilene before the month's out, all fancy clothes and perfume. Shameless, that's what it is. Her poor mother must be turning in her grave. By Monday, the gossip had teeth. Emma found her path blocked by a group of church women led by Mrs. Prudence Ashford, the banker's wife, a woman whose virtue was surpassed only by her willingness to find sin in everyone else. Emma Clark, she declared, her voice carrying down Main Street, you ought to be ashamed of yourself, consorting with men, selling your virtue for protection. I haven't done anything. Emma's voice cracked with desperation. Please, Mrs. Ashford, I've never even spoken to Mr. Hayes. Lies won't save your soul, girl. The whole town saw how he defended you. Men like Colton Hayes don't defend women unless they've got a claim on them. But I swear, your swearing means nothing. Mrs. Ashford's face was hard with righteous certainty. You're a fallen woman, Emma Clark, and no amount of denial will change that. I suggest you leave Red Rock before you corrupt any more innocent souls. Emma fled back to the saloon, tears streaming down her face, while Mrs. Ashford's words echoed behind her like stones thrown at her back. The next few days were a special kind of hell. Customers at the saloon treated her with a mixture of leering familiarity and contempt. The women in town crossed the street to avoid her. Children were pulled away when she passed, as if poverty and scandal were contagious. And through it all, Emma had seen neither hide nor hair of Colton Hayes. Part of her wished he would come back, if only to tell these people they were wrong. But a deeper, more practical part of her knew that his return would only make things worse. His absence at least allowed for the possibility that the gossip would die down, that people would find something new to talk about. She should have known better. On Thursday evening, a week after the incident, Emma was sweeping the saloon floor after closing. Sal had gone to count the night's take, and she was alone except for old Tom, the piano player, who was dozing on his bench. The knock on the door made her jump. "We're closed," she called out. The knock came again, more insistent. Emma set down her broom and crossed to the door, opening it a crack. Her heart stopped. Colton Hayes stood on the boardwalk, his black hat in his hands, his expression unreadable in the light spilling from the saloon. "Miss Clark," he said. "Might I have a word?" Emma's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Behind her she heard Tom's sudden intake of breath. The old man was awake and listening. Mr. Hayes, we're closed." "I know. That's why I came now." His eyes met hers, and Emma saw something in them she hadn't seen before. Was it guilt? Regret? She couldn't tell. "I need to speak with you. It's important." "Sir, I don't think that's wise. People are already talking." "I know what people are saying, Miss Clark. That's exactly why we need to talk." He glanced over his shoulder, as if checking for observers, then back to her. "Please, 5 minutes." Every instinct Emma had screamed at her to close the door, to protect what little reputation she might salvage. But there was something in his voice, not pleading, Colton Hayes would never plead, but something close to earnest, that made her hesitate. "5 minutes," she heard herself say. "But the door stays open." "Fair enough?" She stepped back, allowing him to enter. He was too large for the space, Emma thought wildly. The saloon, which had always seemed vast and loud, suddenly felt small and intimate with Colton Hayes standing in it. He turned to face her, working the brim of his hat in his hands, the first uncertain gesture she'd ever seen from him. "Miss Clark, I owe you an apology." Of all the things Emma had expected him to say, that wasn't one of them. "Sir?" "I acted last week without thinking of the consequences for you. I saw Morrison putting his hands on you, and I—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "I reacted, but I didn't consider how my protection would look to this town, what they would assume, what it would cost you." Emma's throat tightened. "You were trying to help." "Help?" He said the word like it tasted bitter. "I've made things worse for you, haven't I? The gossip, the treatment you've been receiving. How did you know about that?" A ghost of something, amusement, sadness, crossed his face. "Miss Clark, I make it my business to know what happens in this county, and what's been happening to you this past week." He shook his head. "That's on me." "You didn't start the gossip, Mr. Hayes. People will talk regardless, but I gave them reason to, and now I need to fix it." He straightened his shoulders, seemed to come to some decision. "Miss Clark, I'm here to offer you a position." Emma blinked. "A position?" "At my ranch. I need a housekeeper. The work is hard but honest, and it pays $30 a month plus room and board. That's more than Sal's paying you, I'd wager." It was more. It was nearly 3 times more. Emma's mind reeled. "Mr. Hayes, I don't understand. Why would you—" "Because you need a way out of this town, and I need a housekeeper. My last one quit 6 months ago, and the place is going to ruin." He met her eyes steadily. "It's a legitimate offer, Miss Clark. Nothing untoward. You'd have your own room, your own space. I'm barely at the main house anyway. I spend most of my time in the South Range cabin during roundup season. But people are already thinking it. At least this way, you'd be paid well and treated with respect." His jaw tightened. "And anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me." Emma's mind raced. It was a solution, yes, but it was also a trap. Going to work for Colton Hayes would confirm every rumor, cement every assumption. She'd be branded his mistress, his kept woman, regardless of the truth. But staying here? Staying here meant more days of whispers, more nights of leering customers, more years of Sal McCready's groping hands and verbal abuse. It meant slow starvation of the spirit, if not the body. "I need time to think about it," she said finally. Something like respect flickered in Colton's eyes. Of course. Take until Sunday. If you decide to accept, bring your things to the ranch Monday morning. If you don't, he placed a card on the bar. Heavy stock, expensive. If you don't, I'll respect your decision. But Miss Clark? Yes? Whatever you decide, don't let this town make you ashamed of who you are. You've done nothing wrong. He settled his hat on his head, tipped it to her, and left. Emma stood alone in the empty saloon, staring at the card he'd left behind. Heavy cream paper, black lettering. Colton Hayes, Hayes Ranch, Red Rock County, Texas. Behind her, Tom cleared his throat. Girl, you thinking about taking that job? I don't know, Tom. I honestly don't know. Well, let me tell you something I learned in my 67 years on this earth. The old man shuffled over, his fingers still nimble despite his age. Sometimes the devil you don't know is better than the devil you do. And Sal McCready? He spat. That man's the devil with a cash register. Emma picked up the card, held it between her fingers like it might burn her. But if I go work for Mr. Hayes, everyone will think, everyone already thinks it, honey. That ship done sailed. Question is, you gonna let their thinking trap you here, or you gonna take a chance on something better? That night, Emma lay in her narrow bed and stared at the water-stained ceiling. She thought about her mother, who'd married for love and died worn out at 35. She thought about her father, who drowned his grief in bottles until the bottles drowned him. She thought about 8 months of serving drinks to men who looked at her like she was on the menu. And she thought about Colton Hayes standing in the doorway of the saloon, his voice cutting through the noise. Touch her again, and you'll lose more than your hand. She hadn't asked for his protection, hadn't wanted the consequences that came with it. But here she was anyway, holding his card, weighing his offer. A legitimate job, $30 a month. Her own room. Respect, he'd said. He'd promised respect. But could she trust the promise of a man she didn't know? A man the whole county feared and whispered about? A man whose eyes held secrets deeper than any well? By Friday, Emma still hadn't decided. Saturday dawned hot and cloudless, the kind of day where even the dust seemed too tired to rise. Emma went through her morning routine in a fog, sweeping, wiping tables, preparing for the evening crowd. That afternoon, Luther Grant walked into the saloon. Emma knew of Luther Grant the way she knew of scorpions and rattlesnakes, as something dangerous to be avoided. He owned the Silver Spur, the saloon on the north end of town, along with interests in the local brothel and gambling hall. Where Colton Hayes had built his empire on cattle and land, Luther had built his on vice and violence. He was handsome in a slick way. Blonde hair pomaded back, mustache waxed to points, clothes that cost more than Emma made in a year. But his eyes were the eyes of a snake, cold and calculating. Well, well, he drawled, leaning against the bar. If it isn't Red Rock's most talked-about lady. Emma's stomach nodded. Can I help you, Mr. Grant? Oh, I think you can help me very much. He smiled, showing too many teeth. I hear you've had yourself quite a week. Colton Hayes defending your honor, offering you a job? He leaned closer. Tell me, sweetheart, what's it like being the obsession of the great Colton Hayes? I'm not anyone's obsession. Mr. Hayes was being kind. Luther laughed, the sound oily and unpleasant. Kind? Honey, Colton Hayes hasn't been kind a day in his life. Everything he does serves a purpose, and if he's sniffing around you, it's because he wants something. I think you should leave, Mr. Grant. Leave? But I just got here. His hand shot out faster than she expected, grabbing her wrist. The same wrist Jake Morrison had grabbed a week ago. I came to make you an offer, little Emma. A real offer, not like whatever game Colton's playing. Let me go. Emma tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. I'll pay you $50 a month to work at the Silver Spur. You'd have the best room, the finest dresses. All you'd have to do is be friendly to certain customers, high-paying customers. His thumb traced circles on her inner wrist. A girl like you, pretty enough but too proud? You'd make a fortune once we broke you in proper. Horror and rage flooded through Emma in equal measure. I said let me go! Why? So you can run to Colton Hayes? You think he's any different? You think he wants you for your housekeeping skills? Luther's laugh was cruel. He's just more patient than I am, that's all. More willing to play the gentleman. But in the end, He'll want the same thing every man wants from a girl like you. Get your hands off her. The voice came from the doorway. Emma's heart leaped, but it wasn't Colton Hayes. It was Luther's own man, a wiry cowboy named Pete, looking uncomfortable. Boss, maybe we should go. This ain't... Shut up, Pete. Luther didn't release Emma's wrist. I'm conducting business. This ain't business. This is... Pete trailed off, but his meaning was clear. For a long moment, Luther held Emma's gaze, his eyes promising retribution for this small rebellion. Then he released her wrist with a theatrical flourish. Think about my offer, Miss Clark. $50 a month, and all you have to do is abandon this ridiculous pretense of virtue. He straightened his jacket. Because between you and me, this town's already decided what you are. Might as well get paid properly for it. He swept out, Pete trailing behind him with an apologetic glance at Emma. Emma stood shaking, her wrist throbbing. She looked down and saw red marks where Luther's fingers had been, marks that would bruise by morning. Sal McCready emerged from the back room, counting money. What was all that noise? Luther Grant was here. Oh? Sal's piggy eyes gleamed with interest. What did he want? He offered me a job. At the Silver Spur. Sal's face cycled through several emotions before settling on calculation. $50 a month, I'd wager. Maybe more. Emma stared at him. You knew he'd come. I might have mentioned to certain parties that you were considering Colton Hayes' offer. Competition's good for business, girl. Drives up prices. He smirked. So what's it going to be? The rich rancher or the saloon king? Either way, you'll be spreading your... Emma slapped him. The crack of her palm against his jowled cheek echoed through the empty saloon. Sal's head snapped to the side, his eyes going wide with shock that quickly morphed into rage. You little... I quit. The words came out clear and strong, surprising Emma herself. I quit, Mr. McCready, and you can take this job and... She didn't finish. Didn't need to. She turned and ran for the stairs, taking them two at a time, reaching her tiny room and slamming the door. Her hands were shaking as she pulled her carpet bag from under the bed, the same bag she'd carried when she first arrived at the Lucky Dollar 8 months ago. She owned so little. 2 dresses, one for wearing and one for washing, a pair of worn shoes, her mother's Bible, a hairbrush with 3 broken teeth. All of it fit in the bag with room to spare. This was her life. This was everything she had to show for 19 years on Earth, except it wasn't quite everything. Emma pulled out Colton Hayes' card, stared at the heavy paper, the confident black lettering. Sometimes the devil you don't know is better than the devil you do. Tom's words echoed in her mind, and she realized, standing there in that shabby room with Sal's footsteps thundering up the stairs, that she'd made her decision. She grabbed her bag and her mother's Bible, climbed out the window onto the back stairs, the same stairs she'd used 100 times to avoid drunk customers, and dropped to the alley below. The sun was setting as Emma Clark walked out of Red Rock, her worldly possessions in a carpet bag, her future uncertain, and Colton Hayes' card clutched in her hand. She didn't look back. The Hayes Ranch was 5 miles outside of town, up a winding road that climbed into the foothills. Emma had walked less than a mile when she heard the sound of hoofbeats behind her. Her heart hammered. Had Sal sent someone after her? Or worse, had Luther Grant decided to collect his investment early? She turned, ready to run for the scrub brush beside the road. But it was Colton Hayes who rode toward her on a massive bay stallion, his black hat silhouetted against the dying sun. He reined in beside her, his eyes taking in her carpet bag, her bruised wrist, her tear-stained face. Miss Clark. His voice was carefully neutral. You're a day early. I know, I'm sorry, I couldn't stay there another minute. His jaw tightened. Did someone hurt you? No, yes, Emma held up her wrist, showed him the marks. Luther Grant made me an offer, a different kind of offer, and Sal, her voice broke. I quit. I slapped him and I quit, and I had nowhere else to go. Colton dismounted in one smooth motion, took her wrist gently in his hand, examined the bruises. When he looked up, his eyes were the gray of an approaching storm. Luther Grant did this? It's nothing. I'm fine. Emma pulled her hand back. Mr. Hayes, is your offer still good? The housekeeping position? Yes. Then I accept. If you'll still have me. Something shifted in his expression, relief perhaps, or satisfaction. I'll have you. Get on the horse. I can walk. It's 5 miles and near dark. Get on the horse, Miss Clark. Emma had never ridden a horse in her life. Colton had to help her up, his hands firm on her waist, his strength effortless as he lifted her onto the saddle. Then he mounted behind her, one arm coming around her waist to hold her steady as he took the reins. Hold on, he murmured. Emma barely had time to register the warmth of his chest against her back, the solid strength of his arm around her, before the horse moved forward. Not fast, but steady. Carrying her away from Red Rock, away from Sal and Luther and all the whispers towards something unknown. Mr. Hayes, she said softly. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Miss Clark. You haven't seen the house. But despite his words, his arm tightened fractionally around her waist, protective and sure. And as the lights of Red Rock faded behind them, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in 8 months, maybe longer. She felt safe. But the Hayes Ranch house rose from the prairie like a promise, or a threat, depending on your perspective. 2 stories of whitewashed wood and stone, it sprawled across a rise with a view of the valley below. In the fading light, Emma could make out barns, corrals, a bunkhouse, and various outbuildings arranged with military precision. But the house itself, Colton had said it was going to ruin. He hadn't exaggerated. He helped her down from the horse, and Emma stood staring at what had once been a grand home. The porch sagged on one end. Shutters hung crooked. The windows, though intact, were filmed with dust. The garden, if it could be called that, was a tangle of weeds and wild roses gone feral. I told you, Colton said, reading her expression. It's bad. Emma searched for words. It's got good bones? He made a sound that might have been a laugh. Generous of you to say. He grabbed her carpetbag and headed for the porch. Come on, I'll show you your room, then I need to see to the horse. Inside was worse than outside. Dust covered every surface, cobwebs draped from corners. The furniture, what Emma could see of it under dust covers, looked expensive but neglected. The air smelled stale, like a house that had forgotten how to breathe. Colton led her upstairs, down a hallway lined with closed doors to a room at the end. He opened it, struck a match to light the lamp. The room was simple but clean. Someone had at least kept this space maintained. A bed with a plain quilt, a dresser, a washstand, a single chair by the window. Compared to her room above the saloon, it was a palace. Bathroom's down the hall, Colton said, setting her bag on the bed. There's a pump for water, or you can heat some on the stove. Kitchen's downstairs. Help yourself to whatever's there. He paused in the doorway. I'll be in the bunkhouse if you need anything. Door locks from the inside. He was already turning away when Emma found her voice. Mr. Hayes, where do you sleep? Bunkhouse, like I said, or the South Range cabin when I'm working. I haven't slept in this house in 5 years. 5 years? Since his wife died, Emma realized. Mr. Hayes. Colton. The word was quiet but firm. If you're going to work here, you might as well call me Colton. Colton? Emma tested the name. Why did you really hire me? Was it just guilt over what happened at the saloon? He was silent for a long moment, his broad shoulders filling the doorway, his face shadowed by his hat. I hired you, he said finally, because I saw something in you that night. Something I recognized. What? Pride. The kind that won't bend even when it should break. He tipped his hat to her. Get some rest, Miss Clark. Tomorrow we'll discuss your duties. He left, his footsteps echoing down the stairs, the front door closing with a solid thunk. Emma sat on the bed, her bed, in her room, and let out a shaky breath. What had she done? She'd left everything familiar, burned her bridges, and thrown her lot in with a man she didn't know, in a house that felt like a mausoleum, all because she'd slapped Sal McCready and couldn't face another day of Luther Grant's proposition. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt free. For the first time in 8 months, maybe the first time in her life, no one was telling her what to do, where to go, how to act. She had her own room, her own space. She had a job that didn't involve fending off drunk cowboys. She had $30 a month coming to her. And she had Colton Hayes' protection, for whatever that was worth. Emma unpacked her meager belongings, placing her mother's Bible on the bedside table. Then she walked to the window and looked out over the darkening valley. Somewhere down there was Red Rock, with its whispers and judgments. But up here, in this ghost of a house, she could breathe. Tomorrow she'd start earning her keep. Tomorrow she'd face whatever challenges came with being the housekeeper to the most feared man in Texas. But tonight Emma Clark went to sleep in a real bed, in a room with a door that locked, in a house where no one would bother her. And for now, that was enough. Emma woke to birdsong and sunlight streaming through curtains she didn't remember closing. For a moment, disoriented, she thought she was still in her room above the saloon. Then she saw the clean walls, the sturdy furniture, the window overlooking rolling hills instead of a dusty alley. The Hayes Ranch. She was really here. She rose quickly, splashed water from the pitcher into the basin, and did her best to make herself presentable. Her reflection in the small mirror showed dark circles under her eyes, but there was something else there too, a brightness. Maybe hope that hadn't been there in months. Downstairs, she found the kitchen bathed in morning light. And what a kitchen it was, or had been. A massive cast iron stove dominated one wall, copper pots hung from hooks above a workbench, and a pantry door stood half open, revealing shelves that should have been full but were mostly bare. Dust covered everything like a shroud. Emma rolled up her sleeves. She found cleaning supplies in a closet, though the soap was dried out and the broom's bristles were splayed. No matter, she'd worked with less. By the time the sun had fully risen, she had the stove cleared, the counter wiped down, and was attacking the floor with methodical determination. She was on her hands and knees scrubbing when she heard boots on the porch. Colton entered through the back door, stopping short when he saw her. He'd clearly been working already. His shirt was dusty, his face showed a day's worth of stubble, and he carried the scent of horses and leather. "Miss Clark?" He removed his hat. "You didn't have to start so early." "I'm earning my keep, Mr. Colton." The name still felt strange on her tongue. "Besides, I couldn't sleep knowing this kitchen was in such a state." Something flickered across his face. Amusement, perhaps. "Well then, I suppose I should warn you about the parlor." "Worse than this?" "Much worse. My wife used to host parties there. Haven't been touched since—" He trailed off, jaw tightening. "Well, since—" Emma sat back on her heels, pushing a strand of hair from her face. "Colton, if you don't mind my asking, what happened to her?" The silence stretched so long Emma thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Fever. Started as a chill, turned into something the doctor couldn't fix. She was gone in 3 days." His voice was flat, emotionless, but his hands gripped his hat brim white-knuckled. "I was in Abilene on business. Didn't make it back in time." "I'm so sorry." "It was 5 years ago." He said it like that should have been long enough, like grief had an expiration date. "I should let you work. There's eggs and bacon in the cold box, flour in the pantry if you want to make biscuits. I'll be in the north pasture most of the day." "Colton, wait." Emma stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "What exactly do you want me to do here? I mean, specifically. Clean the house, obviously, but what else?" He considered her question with the same seriousness he might give to a business proposition. "Make it livable again. Cook if you're able. Keep the place from falling down around my ears." He paused. "And maybe make it feel less like a tomb." Before she could respond, he was gone, his boots echoing across the porch and down the steps. Emma stood in the kitchen, surrounded by dust and memories that weren't hers, and wondered what kind of love could turn a man's home into a monument to grief. Then she picked up her scrub brush and got back to work. By noon, the kitchen gleamed. Emma had discovered, hidden beneath years of neglect, beautiful tile work, solid oak cabinets, and a window that, once cleaned, offered a view of the mountains. She'd found provisions in the pantry, flour that was still good, sugar, salt, dried beans, and even some preserves that looked homemade, their labels written in a delicate hand that must have been his wife's. She made biscuits and gravy using what she found and hoping Colton wouldn't mind. The routine of cooking, measuring, mixing, kneading settled something in her chest. This was honest work. This was something she knew how to do. She was pulling the biscuits from the oven when she heard horses outside. Multiple horses. Through the window, she saw 3 men dismounting, ranch hands by the look of them, dusty and tired. And Colton, speaking to them in low tones she couldn't hear. One of the men glanced toward the house, said something that made the others laugh. Colton's response was sharp enough that the laughter died instantly. Emma's stomach knotted. They were talking about her. Of course they were. The men dispersed to the bunkhouse and Colton headed for the house. Emma busied herself setting the table, trying to look like she hadn't been watching. He entered, stopped in the doorway, and stared. "Miss Clark, did you clean this entire kitchen in one morning?" "Yes, and I made lunch. I hope that's all right. I found the ingredients and thought, it's more than all right." He moved to the table, looking at the spread, biscuits, gravy, the last of some bacon she'd found, like it was a miracle. "I've been eating cold beans and jerky for 6 months." "Then sit, eat, before it gets cold." He sat, and for a few moments there was only the sound of silverware on plates. Emma watched him from the corner of her eye, gratified to see him actually eating with something like enthusiasm. "Your men," she said carefully. They seemed surprised to see the house occupied. Colton's jaw tightened. "They'll mind their business." "Were they talking about me?" "They were talking. I corrected their understanding." He met her eyes. "You're my housekeeper, Miss Clark. That's what I told them, and that's what they'll believe. Anyone who suggests otherwise will be looking for new employment." It should have been reassuring. Instead, it reminded Emma of her position here, dependent on Colton's goodwill, his protection, his ability to enforce his will on men who clearly had their doubts. "How many men work for you?" she asked. 15 on the ranch itself, another 10 drovers I hire seasonal, plus the cook at the bunkhouse, though he's more useful with a branding iron than a skillet." He paused. "You'll see them around. They're good men mostly, hard workers, but they're also men who've been without civilized company too long. You have any trouble, you tell me. I can handle myself." "I know you can. You slapped Sal McCready after all." Was that approval in his voice? "But all the same, you have trouble. You tell me." After lunch, Colton returned to work, and Emma tackled the parlor. He hadn't exaggerated. If the kitchen had been neglected, the parlor had been abandoned. Dust covers draped over furniture like shrouds. The windows were so filthy they barely let in light, and everywhere, on the mantel, the side tables, the piano in the corner, were photographs in silver frames. Emma picked one up, wiped the dust away. A woman stared back at her. Beautiful, with pale hair and delicate features, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Emma would make in a year. She was laughing at something outside the frame, her whole face lit with joy. Colton's wife, Catherine. Emma had heard the name whispered in town. Catherine Hayes, the belle of Austin, who'd married the rough cowboy and tried to bring civilization to the wild country. Emma looked at other photographs. Catherine at a party, surrounded by well-dressed people. Catherine on a horse, side saddle, looking uncomfortable. Catherine standing next to a younger, smiling Colton, before the scar, before the hardness settled into his features. They'd been happy once. The photographs told that story clearly. What they didn't tell was what had changed, why Colton slept in the bunkhouse, why he'd let this beautiful house decay, why he carried his grief like a stone in his chest 5 years after his wife's death. Emma set the photographs down gently and got to work. She couldn't erase the past, but she could at least clean around it. She was elbow-deep in dust, wrestling with a particularly stubborn window, when she heard the voice behind her. "Well, well, ain't you just making yourself at home?" Emma spun around. A man stood in the doorway, not one of the 3 she'd seen earlier. This one was older, maybe 50, with a hard face and eyes that looked her up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. "I'm Emma Clark, the new housekeeper. And you are?" "Frank Dooley, foreman of this outfit." He stepped into the room, and Emma noticed he walked with a slight limp. "Been working for Mr. Hayes for 10 years. Ain't never seen him hire a housekeeper before." "Well, he has now." Emma lifted her chin. "Is there something you need, Mr. Dooley?" Just wanted to get a look at the girl who's got the boss acting all strange. He moved closer, and Emma resisted the urge to back away. Pretty little thing, ain't you? Bit scrawny for my taste, but I can see why Colton might. Dooley? Colton's voice cut through the room like a blade. He stood in the opposite doorway, his face carved from granite. Get back to work. Boss, I was just introducing myself to the new help. Now, Dooley. The foreman's face flushed red, but he backed toward the door. Yes, sir, Mr. Hayes. At the threshold, he paused. My apologies, Miss Clark. Didn't mean no disrespect. The words were right, but his tone said otherwise. After he left, Emma released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Colton crossed the room to her, his eyes scanning her face. Did he touch you? No, he just looked. Colton's hands clenched into fists. I should fire him. Please don't. The words surprised Emma even as she said them. I can handle a few ugly looks, and you said yourself he's been with you 10 years. Don't let me come between you and your men. You're not coming between anything. He's being disrespectful, and I won't have it. Colton. Emma put her hand on his arm without thinking, felt the coiled tension there. I knew this wouldn't be easy. I knew men would think things, say things. But I can bear it if you can back me up when it truly matters. He looked down at her hand on his arm, and Emma suddenly realized the intimacy of the gesture. She started to pull back, but his hand covered hers, holding it there. I'll always back you up, he said quietly. That's a promise, Emma Clark. The use of her first name sent a strange flutter through her chest. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and Colton released her hand, stepped back. I'll talk to the men tonight. Make sure they understand the situation. Thank you. After he left, Emma stood in the dusty parlor, her hand tingling where he'd touched it, wondering what exactly the situation was. She was his housekeeper. That was all. That was all it could ever be. So why did her heart beat faster when he looked at her like that? The rest of the day passed in a blur of work. Emma cleaned the parlor until it shone, revealing beautiful hardwood floors and elegant furniture beneath the neglect. She found linens in a chest upstairs, aired them out, made up the beds in the guest rooms, even though she doubted they'd ever be used. As the sun set, she made dinner, a simple stew with vegetables from the root cellar and beef from the cold box. She wasn't sure if Colton would come to the house to eat or stay with his men in the bunkhouse, so she set 2 places at the kitchen table just in case. He came in as darkness fell, drawn by the smell of cooking food. Miss Clark, you're spoiling me. It's my job. She ladled stew into bowls, set out fresh bread she'd made that afternoon. Besides, you can't work on cold beans forever. They ate in companionable silence. Emma found herself studying him when she thought he wasn't looking, the way his hands, so capable of violence she'd seen at the saloon, handled the spoon with careful precision. The way his eyes, so hard in town, softened slightly in the warm kitchen light. The house looks different already, he said finally. Feels different. It's a good house. It just needed attention. Catherine used to say that. The name came out rough, like he didn't use it often. She'd say the house was alive, that it needed care and love like a living thing. He stared into his stew. After she died, I couldn't be here. Every room had her in it. Every corner held a memory, so I left it to rot. And now? Now I've got a housekeeper who's too stubborn to let it die. He looked up, and there was something in his eyes. Gratitude, maybe, or regret. Thank you, Emma. The sound of her name in his deep voice did something to her insides. She looked away, flustered. You're welcome. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Colton rose, hand instinctively going to the gun at his hip. A gesture so natural Emma wondered how often he expected trouble. But it was just one of the ranch hands, a young man with nervous eyes. Boss, sorry to bother, but there's a situation in town you should know about. Colton's face hardened. What kind of situation? Luther Grant's been talking, saying things about Miss Clark, about how you stole her right out from under him. He's getting folks riled up, claiming you're taking advantage of a poor girl, keeping her out here where no one can check on her welfare. Emma's stomach dropped. Of course. Of course Luther wouldn't let this go. When did this start? Colton's voice was dangerously quiet. This afternoon, boss. He's been buying drinks at his saloon, telling anyone who will listen that someone ought to come check on Miss Clark, make sure she's all right. He's trying to start a mob, Emma whispered. Colton turned to her. Stay here. Lock the doors. Don't let anyone in except me or Tom. He grabbed his hat, his gun belt. I'm going to town. Colton, wait. But he was already gone, the door slamming behind him, his boots thundering across the porch. Emma heard horses, shouted orders, the sound of men mounting up. She stood alone in the kitchen, the stew growing cold, and wondered what kind of war she'd just started. The hours crawled by. Emma tried to read her mother's Bible, but couldn't focus. She paced the kitchen, the parlor, the hallway. Every sound made her jump, the wind in the eaves, the creak of old wood, the distant call of a coyote. What was happening in town? Was Colton safe? Would Luther really incite people to violence over her? Stupid question. Of course he would. She'd rejected him, embarrassed him, and then immediately gone to work for his biggest rival. In a man like Luther Grant, that would fester like a wound. She was standing at the parlor window, staring into darkness when she saw the lights. Torches. Coming up the road from town, Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. She ran to lock the front door, the back door, checked the windows. Then she stood in the hallway, holding a kitchen knife she'd grabbed without thinking, and waited. The torches grew closer. She could hear voices now, angry and slurred with drink. How many? 10? 20? She couldn't tell. They stopped at the gate. A voice called out. Luther Grant's voice, smooth and poisonous. Emma Clark! We know you're in there. We've come to save you from Colton Hayes. Save her. As if this was rescue and not revenge. Come out, Emma. You don't have to be ashamed. We know he's keeping you here against your will. We know what kind of man he is. Other voices joined in, a chorus of drunken righteousness. Emma recognized some of them, men from town, customers from the saloon, respectable citizens who'd never spoken to her before but now claimed concern for her welfare. She should be terrified. And she was. But underneath the fear was a burning anger. These men, these same men who'd whispered about her, who'd let Jake Morrison paw at her, who'd called her trash and worse, now they pretended to care? Now they claimed to be her saviors? Emma crossed to the window, threw it open, and leaned out. Go home, she shouted. I don't need saving. I'm here by my own choice. Luther stepped forward, his face illuminated by torchlight. Emma, honey, you don't have to be brave. We know he's got some kind of hold on you, but you're safe now. Come with us, and we'll see you're properly cared for. Properly cared for? By you? Emma's laugh was bitter. You offered to sell me to your customers, Luther Grant? Don't you dare stand there and pretend this is about my welfare. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Good. Let them hear the truth. The girl's hysterical, Luther said smoothly. Hayes has clearly manipulated her mind. The only person manipulating anyone is you. Emma gripped the windowsill, her knuckles white. You're angry because I chose honest work over being your whore. You're angry because Colton Hayes treats me with more respect than you or any man in this town ever has. So take your fake concern and your torches and go home. We can't do that, Emma. Luther's voice hardened. We have a duty to this community. We can't let Colton Hayes corrupt another innocent. A gunshot split the night. The crowd scattered like startled birds, and through the gap they left, Emma saw Colton Hayes on his horse, his rifle smoking, his face terrible in its rage. The next man who steps on my property gets the bullet in him, not the air. His voice carried across the yard, cold and absolute. Go home, now. Hayes! Luther found his courage, though he stayed well back. You can't threaten us. We're here for the girl's protection. You're here because you're a coward who hides behind a mob. Colton urged his horse forward, and men scrambled out of his way. You want Emma Clark? You'll have to go through me, and I promise you, Luther, that's not a fight you'll win. Behind Colton, Emma saw more riders. His ranch hands, armed and grim-faced, they fanned out, creating a wall between the house and the mob. Luther looked at the odds, at Colton's rifle, at the cold promise in his eyes. This isn't over, Hayes. Yes, it is. Unless you want the sheriff to hear about how you tried to incite a riot, how you trespassed on private property, how you threatened a woman under my protection. Colton's smile was sharp as broken glass. Your choice, Luther. Leave now, or explain yourself to the law. For a long moment, the night balanced on a knife's edge. Then Luther spat in the dust and turned away. Come on, boys. The girl's made her choice. Let her live with it. The mob dispersed, their torches bobbing away into darkness, their righteous anger deflating like a punctured balloon. Emma sagged against the window frame, her legs suddenly weak. Colton dismounted, gave orders to his men in a low voice, then strode to the house. Emma met him at the door, still holding her kitchen knife. He looked at the knife, at her white face, at the tremor in her hands. You all right? I'm fine. I told them I didn't need saving. I told them I was here by choice. Her voice shook despite her best efforts. I told them I heard. His hand covered hers on the knife, gently pried it from her grip. I heard every word. You were brave, Emma. Foolish, but brave. They had no right. No, they didn't. He guided her to a chair, pressed a glass of whiskey into her hands. Drink this. She drank, coughed, as the liquid burned down her throat. How did you know? How did you get back in time? I didn't go to town. I got halfway there and realized it was a trap. Luther wanted me gone so he could come here. His jaw tightened. I turned back, gathered the men, and rode hard. If we'd been 5 minutes later, but you weren't. Emma set down the glass, met his eyes. You were here. You protected me. Again. Emma, why? The question burst out before she could stop it. Why do you keep protecting me? I'm nobody, nothing, just a saloon girl you saw being mistreated. Why does it matter to you? Colton was silent for a long moment. Then he knelt in front of her chair, his eyes level with hers. You want the truth? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Because when I saw you that night in the saloon, standing up to Jake Morrison, even though you were terrified, refusing to be ashamed, even though everyone was judging you, I saw someone worth protecting. His hand came up, brushed a strand of hair from her face, a gesture so tender it made her breath catch. And because I'm tired of letting good things die, Emma, I've spent 5 years in the dark, and then you walked into my life with your stubborn pride and your determination, and suddenly the dark doesn't seem so permanent anymore. Emma's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. Colton, A commotion outside cut her off. Shouting, the sound of horses in distress. Then Tom's voice raised in alarm. Colton was on his feet instantly, hand on his gun. Stay here. He rushed out, and Emma, ignoring his order, followed. In the yard, chaos reigned. The horses in the corral were panicking, crashing against the fences. And Emma could see why. Someone had left the gate open, and something had spooked them badly. Boss, Tom ran up, out of breath. The fence? Someone cut the fence on the north pasture. The cattle are scattering. Colton swore viciously. How many men do we have here? Just 6. The others went to escort the mob back to town like you ordered. Not enough. Colton's mind was clearly racing. Tom, take 3 men and start rounding up the cattle. Frank, you and the others check the rest of the fences. Make sure this is the only breach. He turned to Emma. Get back in the house and lock. No. Emma straightened her shoulders. I can help. I can ride. You just said last night you'd never been on a horse. I said I'd never ridden a horse. Didn't say I couldn't learn. She met his gaze steadily. You need every hand you have, Colton. Let me help. He looked like he wanted to argue, but another crash from the corral decided him. Fine, but you stay with Tom, you follow his orders exactly, and if there's any danger, you ride back here. Understood? Understood. What followed was the longest night of Emma's life. Tom gave her a gentle mare named Daisy and a quick lesson in staying in the saddle. Then they were off, riding into the darkness, following the sounds of panicked cattle and the distant shouts of ranch hands. Emma had never worked so hard. Her muscles screamed, her hands blistered, her throat grew raw from calling out to cattle that didn't want to be found. But she kept going, kept riding, kept doing whatever Tom told her to do. As dawn broke, they finally had the last of the cattle rounded up and secured in a different pasture. Emma slid off Daisy, her legs nearly buckling, and leaned against the fence. Colton rode up, looking as exhausted as she felt. All accounted for. All accounted for, boss, Tom confirmed. Lost maybe 24 head to scattering, but we'll find them come daylight. Could have been a lot worse. It was sabotage, Frank Dooley said, riding up with a piece of cut fence wire. Clean cuts. Someone knew what they were doing. Colton's face was granite. Luther. Has to be. Soon as you left to face down the mob, someone snuck back here and did this. Tom spat. Sorry, boss. We should have kept better watch. Not your fault. I underestimated how far Luther would go. Colton looked at Emma, his eyes softening fractionally. You all right? Tired, sore, but all right. She managed a smile. Still think hiring me was a good idea? Best decision I've made in 5 years. He said it quietly, but every man there heard it. Emma felt her cheeks flush. I should get back to the house. Make breakfast for everyone. Emma, you've been up all night. So have you. So have all of you, and you'll work better with food in your bellies. She straightened her shoulders, ignoring her aching muscles. Besides, it's what you pay me for, isn't it? A smile tugged at Colton's mouth, the first real smile she'd seen from him. Yes, ma'am. Emma made it back to the house on sheer will alone. She washed her face, changed into her other dress, and set about making the largest breakfast she'd ever attempted. Eggs, bacon, biscuits, gravy, pancakes, everything she could find and cook. The men came in shifts, exhausted and hungry. Emma served them all, refilling plates and coffee cups, listening to their talk of fences and cattle and what should be done about Luther Grant. Frank Dooley was the last to come in. He stood in the doorway, hat in hands, looking uncomfortable. Miss Clark, I owe you an apology. What I said yesterday, the way I looked at you, it was disrespectful. You've proved yourself tonight, proved you're more than just... He stopped, shook his head. Well, I'm sorry. Emma was so tired she almost laughed. Apology accepted, Mr. Dooley. Now sit down and eat before the food gets cold. He sat, and Emma poured him coffee, and just like that she'd won over Colton's foreman. The rest of the men filtered out to catch a few hours of sleep before the day's work began again. Emma was cleaning up when Colton came in, looking like he might fall asleep standing up. Emma, go to bed. You've done enough. So have you. She poured him the last of the coffee. When's the last time you slept, Colton? Don't remember. He drank the coffee black, grimacing at the bitterness. Luther's declared war. He won't stop with sabotage. He'll keep pushing until one of us breaks. Then we don't break. Emma surprised herself with the certainty in her voice. We hold our ground. We protect what's ours. Colton looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. When did this become yours? When you gave me a place here. When you stood up for me. When you... Emma's voice caught. She was so tired, her defenses worn down. When you made me feel like I mattered for the first time in my life. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Colton set down his coffee cup, crossed the kitchen until he stood in front of her. You do matter, Emma Clark. Don't ever doubt that. His hand came up, cupped her cheek. Emma's breath caught. This was wrong. She was his employee. He was her boss. They'd both be ruined if anyone saw. But she didn't pull away. Neither did he. For a long moment, they stood there, the morning light streaming through the clean windows, the kitchen warm and quiet around them. Then Colton stepped back, his hand falling away, his expression carefully neutral. Get some rest, Emma. That's an order. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and fled to her room. She collapsed on her bed, still dressed, and fell asleep instantly. But even in sleep, she could feel the phantom touch of his hand on her cheek, could hear his voice saying her name like it meant something, like she meant something. And for the first time in her life, Emma Clark began to believe it might be true. Emma woke in the late afternoon to the sound of hammering. She lay still for a moment, disoriented by the slant of golden light through her window, by the ache in every muscle of her body. Then memory flooded back, the mob, the sabotage, the long night rounding up cattle, and Colton's hand on her cheek in the kitchen. She sat up too quickly, her head spinning. Through the window she could see men working on the fences, their movements purposeful and steady. Life on the ranch went on, regardless of Luther Grant's schemes or her own confused feelings. She changed into her work dress, the one she'd washed and hung to dry yesterday, back when the world seemed simpler, and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was exactly as she'd left it, dishes washed and put away. Someone had been thoughtful. The hammering grew louder as she stepped onto the porch. Colton was there, stripped to his shirt sleeves despite the autumn chill, driving nails into a new porch board. The old one, she noticed, had rotted clear through. He looked up at her approach, straightened. "You should be resting." "I've rested enough. How long was I asleep?" 8 hours, give or take." He wiped sweat from his brow with his forearm. "You needed it." Emma looked out at the ranch, at the men working, at the mountains rising purple in the distance. "How bad is the damage?" "Could have been worse. We lost about 30 head of cattle, but we'll likely find most of them in the next few days. 3 sections of fence need replacing. Luther's men did a thorough job." His jaw tightened. "Professional job. He hired someone who knows ranching." "What are you going to do?" "What can I do? I can't prove it was him. Can't ride into town and shoot him, much as I'd like to." He drove another nail with more force than necessary. "So I fix my fences, protect my land, and wait for him to make a mistake." Emma sat on the porch step, drew her knees up. "This is my fault. If I hadn't come here—" "Don't!" Colton's voice was sharp. "Don't you dare blame yourself for Luther Grant's vindictiveness. This was brewing long before you arrived. You just gave him an excuse to act on it." "What do you mean?" Colton was quiet for a moment, his hands stilling on the hammer. When he spoke, his voice was measured, careful. "Luther and I have history, goes back to before Catherine, before this ranch was built. We were friends once, if you can believe that." Emma couldn't quite picture it. Colton Hayes and Luther Grant as friends seemed as likely as a wolf befriending a snake. "What happened?" "We both loved the same woman." He said it simply, without drama. "Catherine Ashford, from Austin. Beautiful, educated, everything a man could want. Luther saw her at a dance, decided she'd make the perfect wife for an up-and-coming saloon owner. Problem was, she didn't want him. She wanted you. She wanted the dream of me, the rough cowboy who'd make his fortune, who'd build her a grand house, who'd give her the adventure she couldn't find in Austin society." His laugh was bitter. "I gave her the house. Gave her the adventure too, I suppose. Just not the kind she wanted." Emma heard the pain beneath his words, the old guilt. "You made her happy, Colton. I've seen the photographs." "For a while. But this land, this life, it wore her down. The isolation, the hardship, the long winters. She tried, God knows she tried. Hosted parties, planted gardens, made curtains for every window. But she was trying to create Austin in the middle of the Texas wilderness, and it couldn't be done." He set down the hammer, stared at his calloused hands. "The fever that killed her? She caught it riding to town in a rainstorm because she was desperate for company, for conversation, for anything that reminded her of home. That's not your fault." "Isn't it? I knew she was unhappy, knew she didn't belong here, but I was too proud to admit it, too stubborn to let her go back to Austin where she'd be safe." He looked at Emma then, his eyes dark with old regret. "And Luther knew it too. After she died, he made sure everyone in town knew it. Made sure they knew I'd killed my wife as surely as if I'd put a gun to her head." Emma's heart ached for him. "So when you defended me, when you hired me, I gave him another weapon, another way to hurt me." Colton picked up the hammer again, turned it over in his hands. "But here's the thing, Emma. I don't regret it. Even knowing what it would cost, what it has cost, I'd do it again." The weight of his words settled over her. Before she could respond, hoofbeats sounded on the drive. They both turned to see a rider approaching, not one of the ranch hands, but a stranger on a dusty gray horse. Colton's hand went to his gun. "Stay behind me." The rider drew closer, and Emma saw it was a young man, barely more than a boy, with a mailbag slung across his shoulder. He reined in at a respectful distance. "Mr. Hayes, got a telegram for you, from Austin." Colton took the telegram, flipped the boy a coin. "Much obliged." The boy tipped his hat and rode off. Colton opened the telegram, his face going carefully blank as he read. "What is it?" Emma asked. "Catherine's sister. She's coming to visit." He handed Emma the telegram, and she read the crisp words. Arriving Thursday. Stop. Need to discuss family matters. Stop. Hope this finds you well. Stop. Margaret. When's Thursday? Tomorrow. Colton rubbed his face, suddenly looking exhausted. Of all the times for her to show up. You don't get along. We get along fine. Margaret's a good woman, nothing like Catherine. More practical, more suited to reality. He gestured at the house, at the ranch. But she hasn't been here since the funeral. Seen this place again, seen how I've let it decay. The house looks better now, Emma said quickly. I've cleaned most of it. We can make up one of the guest rooms, make her comfortable. Emma, you don't understand. Margaret is Catherine's sister. She's going to take one look at you and know exactly what people are saying. And she's going to ask questions I can't answer. Emma felt ice in her stomach. What kind of questions? The kind about why I have a 19-year-old girl living in my house? The kind about what my intentions are? The kind about whether I've learned anything from what happened to Catherine? I'll stay in the bunkhouse while she's here. No. His voice was firm. You're my housekeeper. You have every right to be here. I won't hide you away like some shameful secret. He met her eyes. But I need you to be prepared. Margaret's sharp, and she cares about propriety. This situation, no matter how innocent, is going to raise her concerns. That night, Emma barely slept. She kept thinking about Margaret, about what Catherine's sister would see when she looked at the girl living in her dead sister's house. Would she see a housekeeper, or would she see what everyone else saw, a saloon girl who'd gotten her hooks into a wealthy rancher? The next morning, Emma was up before dawn, cleaning rooms that were already clean, cooking enough food to feed an army. She changed the sheets in the best guest room, arranged fresh flowers in a vase, made sure every surface gleamed. Colton found her polishing the banister for the third time. Emma, the house is perfect. You've done more in a few days than I've done in 5 years. It needs to be better than perfect. Your sister-in-law, former sister-in-law, Catherine's been gone 5 years. She's still going to judge. She's going to see me and make assumptions. Colton's hand covered hers on the banister, stilling her frantic polishing. Let her assume, let her judge. You know the truth, and so do I. That's all that matters. But when the carriage arrived that afternoon, and Margaret Ashford stepped down in her tailored traveling suit and feathered hat, Emma wasn't so sure. Margaret was 40, handsome rather than beautiful, with sharp eyes that took in everything, the improved house, the clean yard, and most especially Emma standing on the porch in her simple calico dress. Colton. She embraced him briefly, properly. You look well. Better than the last time I saw you. You too, Margaret. How was the journey? Long, dusty. The roads are terrible this time of year. Her eyes shifted to Emma. And who is this? This is Miss Emma Clark, my housekeeper. Emma, this is Mrs. Margaret Ashford, Catherine's sister. Emma curtsied, suddenly feeling like a child playing dress-up. Pleased to meet you, ma'am. Margaret's eyebrows rose fractionally. Housekeeper? My goodness, Colton, you've finally hired someone. I'd almost given up hope. She turned back to Emma, her gaze assessing. How long have you been in Mr. Hayes's employ, Miss Clark? Just over a week, ma'am. A week, I see. Something flickered in Margaret's eyes. Calculation, perhaps, or concern. Well, the house certainly looks improved. You've done remarkable work in such a short time. Thank you, ma'am. Come inside, Margaret, Colton said, offering his arm. Emma's prepared refreshments, and you must be tired from your journey. Over tea in the parlor, the same parlor Emma had scrubbed clean, where Catherine's photographs still watched from their frames, Margaret explained the purpose of her visit. I've come about the house in Austin, Catherine's inheritance. As you know, it's been sitting empty since Mother passed. She set down her teacup with delicate precision. The family wants to sell it, but as Catherine's widower you have certain legal claims. I need your signature to proceed with the sale. Of course, whatever the family wants. Just like that? No conditions? Colton's smile was tight. What use do I have for a house in Austin, Margaret? Sell it. Use the money however you see fit. Margaret studied him for a long moment. You've changed, Colton. You seem lighter somehow, less burdened. Maybe I am. Her eyes slid to Emma, who was pouring more tea, trying to be invisible. And would this lightness have anything to do with your young housekeeper? The air in the room grew tense. Emma's hand trembled slightly, making the teapot rattle against the cup. Emma's presence here is purely professional, Colton said evenly. Of course it is. Margaret's tone suggested she believed nothing of the sort. Forgive me, Colton, but you must see how this looks. A girl, and she is just a girl, barely out of childhood, living alone with you in this house? She's my employee. She has her own room, her own space. I don't doubt your intentions are honorable. I know you, Colton. You're many things, but you're not a man who preys on young women. Margaret leaned forward, her voice earnest. But intentions don't matter to society. Appearances matter. And this appearance is damaging to both of you. Emma couldn't stay silent any longer. Mrs. Ashford, I appreciate your concern, but I assure you Mr. Hayes has been nothing but respectful. He's given me honest work when no one else would. He's protected me when others sought to harm me. Whatever people choose to think about that is their failing, not ours. Margaret's eyes widened slightly at Emma's boldness. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. You've got spirit, Miss Clark. Catherine would have liked you. The smile faded. But spirit doesn't protect a woman's reputation. And a ruined reputation, my dear, is something you can never recover. My reputation was ruined the moment I had to work in a saloon to survive, Emma said quietly. At least here, I'm ruined with dignity. Margaret looked at Colton. Where did you find her? The Lucky Dollar in Red Rock. She was being harassed by some drovers. I intervened. And then hired her immediately? Not immediately. I offered her a position a week later, after the gossip had already started. Margaret sat back, her expression thoughtful. So you're saying the damage was already done, and hiring her was actually an act of mercy? I'm saying I saw someone who needed help, and I had the means to provide it. Nothing more complicated than that. Colton Hayes, the reluctant savior. Margaret's laugh was without humor. Do you know what they're saying in Red Rock? I stopped there on my way here. The whole town is abuzz with speculation about you and Miss Clark. Some say she's your mistress. Others say you've promised to marry her. And a few, led by a particularly odious man named Luther Grant, suggest you're taking advantage of her vulnerable position. Emma's cheeks burned. Colton's face had gone to stone. Luther Grant is a liar and a saboteur. He has his own reasons for spreading rumors. I'm sure he does, but that doesn't make the rumors less damaging. Margaret looked at Emma with something like pity. Miss Clark, I don't mean to be cruel, but you must understand your position here is untenable. You cannot stay. That's not your decision to make, Colton said. Perhaps not, but someone needs to speak sense. This situation helps no one. Miss Clark's reputation, whatever remains of it, will be completely destroyed. And you, Colton, you'll be seen as a man who learned nothing from Catherine's death, who once again puts his own desires above a woman's welfare. Colton stood abruptly. That's enough, Margaret. Is it? Is it really? Margaret stood too, facing him. Catherine loved you, Colton. Despite everything, the isolation, the hardship, the loneliness, she loved you. And it killed her. Are you really going to repeat that pattern with this girl? Emma is nothing like Catherine. She's stronger, more resilient. She's 19. She doesn't know what she wants, what she needs. She's grateful to you for rescuing her, and she's mistaking that gratitude for something else. Can't you see that? Emma found her voice, though it shook with anger. I'm standing right here, Mrs. Ashford. Perhaps you could stop talking about me as if I'm not in the room. Margaret turned to her, and Emma saw genuine concern in her eyes. You're right. I apologize. Let me speak to you directly then. Miss Clark, do you have feelings for my former brother-in-law? The question hung in the air like a blade. Emma felt Colton's eyes on her, felt the weight of the moment. I have respect for him, she said carefully, gratitude for what he's done for me. But my feelings are my own business. Not when they affect your future, not when they could ruin you both. Margaret's voice softened. I have a proposal. Come back to Austin with me. I can find you a respectable position, governess, perhaps, or companion to a wealthy widow. You'd have good pay, good references, a chance at a real future. I have a real future here. Do you? What future can you have as a housekeeper on an isolated ranch with a man the world believes is your lover? What happens when you want to marry, to have a family? No respectable man will have you. Then I'll find a man who isn't respectable, Emma shot back. or I'll have no man at all. Either way, it's my choice. Margaret looked at Colton. Talk sense to her. But Colton was looking at Emma, his expression unreadable. Emma's right. It's her choice. I won't force her to do anything. Hoping to prevent another tragedy. But I can see I'm wasting my time. Margaret, wait. Colton's voice stopped her at the door. Stay the night, at least. It's a long journey back to town and it'll be dark soon. She hesitated, then nodded stiffly. Very well. But in the morning, I'm leaving, and I'm washing my hands of this entire situation. She swept from the room, her footsteps echoing up the stairs. Emma and Colton stood in the suddenly quiet parlor, the afternoon light slanting through the windows, dust motes dancing in the golden rays. I'm sorry, Emma said finally. I've caused you nothing but trouble. You've caused me nothing but joy. The words came out rough, raw. Colton crossed to her, took her shoulders gently. Emma, Margaret's right about one thing. I should think about your future, about what's best for you, and maybe that's not here. Maybe that's in Austin, with a respectable position and a chance at a normal life. Emma looked up at him, at the face that had become dear to her in such a short time. Is that what you want? For me to leave? What I want doesn't matter. It matters to me. His hands tightened on her shoulders. Emma, no, let me finish. She took a breath, gathering her courage. You asked me once if I had feelings for you. I didn't answer then, but I'll answer now. Yes. Yes, I have feelings for you, Colton Hayes. I don't know if it's gratitude or something more, but I know that when I'm with you, I feel safe. I feel valued. I feel like I matter, and I'm not ready to give that up, no matter what your sister-in-law or the whole town of Red Rock thinks. Colton's eyes darkened. His hand came up to cup her cheek, the same gesture as before, but this time there was no hesitation. Emma, you're so young. You deserve— Don't tell me what I deserve. I've had enough people deciding that for me. She covered his hand with hers. I know what I want. The question is, do you? For a moment, the world held its breath. Then Colton's thumb traced her cheekbone, his touch achingly gentle. I want you to stay, he said quietly. God help me. I want you to stay. The kiss was inevitable. It had been building since that first night in the saloon, through every word and glance and touch. When his lips met hers, Emma felt something inside her ignite. Not the desperate need for protection, not gratitude or obligation, but something deeper, truer. She kissed him back with all the pent-up longing she'd been afraid to name, and his arms came around her, pulling her close. For a moment, there was no scandal, no gossip, no past or future. Just this, just them, just the truth of what they felt. Then reality crashed back. Colton pulled away, breathing hard. We can't, Emma, we can't do this. Why not? Because Margaret's right. Because I'm too old for you. Because I'll ruin you completely if we— He released her, stepped back. Because I can't be the man who destroys another woman. Before Emma could respond, the sound of shattering glass came from upstairs, followed by Margaret's scream. They ran, taking the stairs two at a time. Margaret's door was open, and inside the window was broken, a rock lying amid the shattered glass. Margaret stood frozen, staring at the rock with a piece of paper tied around it. Colton grabbed the rock, untied the paper, read the scrawled words. His face went pale with rage. What does it say? Margaret asked. It says the whore's protector won't always be there. Tell her to watch her back. He crumpled the paper in his fist. Luther. It has to be Luther. Someone threw a rock through my window with a threatening note, and you think this is acceptable? Margaret's voice was shrill with shock and fear. This is what you've brought to your home, Colton. This is the danger you've put Miss Clark in. I'll protect her. You can't protect her from everything. You can't be everywhere at once. Margaret turned to Emma. Is this the future you want? Living in fear, wondering when the next attack will come? Because this is only the beginning. Luther Grant won't stop until one of you is dead or destroyed. Emma's hands were shaking, but she kept her voice steady. I won't be driven away by threats. Then you're a fool. Margaret grabbed her traveling case. I'm leaving, tonight. I don't care if it's dark. I'm not staying in this house of madness another moment. Margaret, please. No, Colton. I've tried to help. I've tried to make you see reason. but you're both determined to destroy yourselves. She stopped at the door, looked back at Emma. My offer stands, Miss Clark. When you come to your senses, and you will, find me in Austin. I'll help you start over. She left, and minutes later they heard her carriage racing down the drive. Emma and Colton stood in the ruined guest room, surrounded by broken glass that glittered like diamonds in the lamplight. She's right, Colton said finally. This is too dangerous. You should go. I'm not going anywhere. Emma, I said I'm not going. She turned to face him fully. You asked me what I want. I want to stay. I want to fight. I want to prove to Luther Grant and everyone else that they don't get to decide my life. She took his hand. And I want you. God help me. I want you, and I don't care if it's wrong or scandalous or ruins us both. Colton looked at their joined hands, at her determined face. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that for the first time in my life, I'm choosing something for myself. Not because I'm grateful, not because I'm desperate, but because I want it. Her voice dropped. Because I want you. The confession hung between them, trembling with possibility. Colton's jaw worked, his eyes stormy with conflict. If we do this, he said slowly, there's no going back. Your reputation will be beyond repair. Mine too, probably. We'll be outcasts. We're already outcasts. It will get worse. Luther will escalate. The town will turn on us completely. Let them. Emma. He pulled her close, pressed his forehead to hers. I can't be the reason you throw away your future. You're not throwing it away? You're giving me one. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Colton Hayes, I'm a virgin saloon girl with no family, no prospects, and a reputation in tatters. The respectable future everyone keeps talking about? It doesn't exist for me. It never did. But this, us, this could be real. If you'll let it. She saw the moment he broke, the moment his resolve crumbled. His hands framed her face, his eyes searching hers one last time for doubt, for hesitation. Finding none, he kissed her again, and this time there was no pulling away, no voice of reason. This time there was only yes. Later, much later, they lay in his bed in the room he hadn't slept in for 5 years. Emma's head rested on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. His fingers traced idle patterns on her bare shoulder. Not for long, sweetheart, he murmured into her hair. What? That's what I should have said. When you told me you were still a virgin, I should have said not for long, sweetheart. His arms tightened around her. Would have saved us some time. Emma laughed, the sound light and free. We got here eventually. We did. He was quiet for a moment. Emma, I need you to understand something. What we've done, what we are now, there's no going back. We'll face opposition from every side. People will say terrible things. The situation with Luther will likely get worse before it gets better. I know. And you're still sure? She propped herself up on one elbow, looked down at him. In the moonlight streaming through the window, she could see the scar on his face, the lines of worry around his eyes. The vulnerability he showed to no one else. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He pulled her down for a kiss, tender and possessive. Then we'll face it together. Whatever comes. Whatever comes, she agreed. But neither of them could have predicted what would come with the dawn. The sound of hoofbeats woke them, many hoofbeats, coming fast. Colton was out of bed instantly, pulling on clothes, reaching for his gun. Stay here, he ordered. Emma ignored him, dressing quickly and following him downstairs. Through the window, she could see riders approaching, at least a dozen, with torches blazing in the pre-dawn darkness. But these weren't Luther's men. They were townspeople, and at their head was Sheriff James Harlow, his badge gleaming in the torchlight. Colton opened the door, Emma behind him. Sheriff, this is a surprise. Wish I could say it was a social call, Hayes. The sheriff dismounted, his face grave. But I'm afraid I'm here on official business. What kind of business? The kind that involves Luther Grant. He was found dead in his office an hour ago, shot twice in the chest. The sheriff's eyes were hard, and the bullets matched the caliber of the gun you carry. The world tilted. Emma gripped Colton's arm, felt his muscles turn to steel. I didn't kill Luther Grant. Maybe not. But you've got motive. He's been harassing you and Miss Clark here for weeks. You've got opportunity. You weren't in the bunkhouse last night, were you? No one can account for your whereabouts. The sheriff's hand moved to his gun. Colton Hayes, I'm placing you under arrest for the murder of Luther Grant. You'll get a fair trial, but you're coming with me. Now. Emma's world shattered. She watched as they took Colton away in chains, watched as the man she'd just given herself to was led off to jail for a murder he didn't commit. And she knew, with cold certainty, that this was exactly what Luther had wanted all along. Even in death, he was destroying them. Emma stood on the porch in her hastily buttoned dress, watching the torches disappear down the road toward Red Rock. Colton rode in the middle of the group, his hands bound, his head held high even in chains. He hadn't looked back, hadn't said goodbye, had only met her eyes for one brief moment that said everything words couldn't. Trust me, wait for me, don't give up. The sun was rising now, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that seemed obscene in their beauty. How could the world look so peaceful when everything was falling apart? Miss Clark. She turned to find Frank Dooley standing in the yard, his hat in his hands. The other ranch hands were gathered behind him, their faces somber. We know the boss didn't do this, Frank said. Whatever the sheriff thinks, whatever evidence they claim to have, we know. Colton Hayes is a lot of things, but he ain't no backshooter. Then we have to prove it. Emma's voice came out stronger than she felt. We have to find out who really killed Luther Grant. That's what we figured you'd say. Tom stepped forward. We're with you, Miss Emma. Whatever you need. Emma looked at these hard men, these cowboys who'd judged her just days ago, now standing ready to fight for her and Colton both. Something fierce and determined took root in her chest. First, I need to go to town. I need to see Colton. Need to know what evidence they have against him. That ain't a good idea, Frank said carefully. Town's liable to be in an uproar. You walking into Red Rock right now? I don't care what the town thinks. I never have. She straightened her shoulders. Tom, saddle Daisy for me. Frank, I need you to keep the ranch running while I'm gone. The cattle need tending. The fences need finishing. Miss Emma, with all respect, the cattle can wait. The boss is in jail. The boss would want his ranch protected. Emma's voice was firm. Luther's dead, but his men aren't. They might see this as an opportunity to strike while we're weak. We can't let that happen. Frank studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're right. We'll keep watch. Keep working. But Miss Emma? You be careful in town. There's folks there who'd like nothing better than to see you brought low alongside the boss. I know. Emma went back inside, changed into her better dress, the one that was still simple but at least clean and whole. She pinned her hair up properly, washed her face, tried to look respectable. Then she saw herself in the mirror and laughed bitterly. Respectable? After last night, after everything, she'd never be respectable again. But maybe respectable didn't matter. Maybe what mattered was truth. The ride to Red Rock took an hour, and with every mile, Emma's resolve hardened. She thought about Colton, about his hands on her skin, his whispered words in the darkness. She thought about the future they'd glimpsed, fragile as dawn, now shattered by a dead man's final revenge, because this was revenge. Luther Grant might be dead, but his hatred lived on, perfectly crafted to destroy the man who'd won Catherine Ashford's heart all those years ago. Red Rock was in chaos when Emma arrived. People clustered in groups on the streets, their voices loud with speculation and shock. Luther Grant had been many things, a saloon owner, a businessman, a schemer, but he'd also been powerful, and his murder sent ripples of fear through the town. Emma dismounted in front of the sheriff's office, tied Daisy to the hitching post. Every eye on the street turned to her, and the whispers began immediately. That's her, the girl. Has the audacity to show her face? Probably helped him do it. Murder's whore. Emma held her head high and walked into the sheriff's office. Sheriff Harlow looked up from his desk, his face hardening when he saw her. Miss Clark, I expected you'd show up. I want to see him. That's not possible. He's awaiting arraignment. I want to see him. Emma's voice didn't waver. Please, Sheriff, 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Harlow studied her, his expression unreadable. He was a fair man, Emma had heard, honest as far as any lawman could be in a town split between competing powers. But fair didn't mean sympathetic. 5 minutes, he said finally, but I'm watching, and if you try to pass him anything, help him escape. I just want to talk to him. Harlow led her to the cells in the back. There were 3 of them, all empty except for the last one. Colton sat on the narrow cot, his elbows on his knees, his head bowed. He looked up when he heard footsteps, and something flickered in his eyes when he saw Emma. You shouldn't be here, he said. Where else would I be? She gripped the bars, wanting to touch him, to reassure herself he was real. Colton, what happened? What evidence do they have? He stood, moved to the bars, their fingers intertwined through the cold metal. Luther was killed with a .45 caliber bullet, same as what I carry. They found my gloves near the body, the ones I lost 2 days ago when we were rounding up cattle. Someone planted them, someone setting you up. Obviously, but proving it is another matter. His jaw tightened. Emma, I need you to listen to me. You need to go back to the ranch, pack your things, and leave. Go to Austin, find Margaret, take her up on her offer. I'm not leaving you. You have to. This is going to get ugly. When they convict me, if they convict you. We're going to fight this, Colton. We're going to prove you're innocent. And how do you propose we do that? I have no alibi. He stopped, his eyes cutting to where Sheriff Harlow stood watching. I was alone all night. Can't prove otherwise without ruining you completely. Emma understood. If Colton admitted they'd been together, it would confirm every ugly rumor, destroy what little was left of her reputation, but it would also give him an alibi. Sheriff, she called out, I can provide Mr. Hayes with an alibi for last night. Emma, no. He was with me, all night, in his room. She took a breath, met Harlow's eyes steadily. We were together, as more than employer and housekeeper. Harlow's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. You're saying you can account for his whereabouts between the hours of midnight and 3 a.m.? Yes, the entire time. Miss Clark, do you understand what you're confessing to? You're admitting to moral turpitude, to an illicit relationship. I'm admitting to the truth. And the truth is that Colton Hayes couldn't have killed Luther Grant because he was with me. Colton's hand tightened on hers through the bars. Emma, please don't do this. My reputation isn't worth your life. She turned back to Harlow. Does this change anything? Can you release him now? The sheriff sighed heavily. I'm afraid not, Miss Clark. Your testimony is compromised by your obvious attachment to the accused. A good lawyer would tear it apart in court. You have every reason to lie to protect him. But I'm not lying. Maybe not, but proving that is a different matter entirely. Harlow moved toward the door. Your 5 minutes are up, Miss Clark. I suggest you go home and think very carefully about what you're willing to sacrifice for this man. Emma ignored him, focused on Colton. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to find out who really killed Luther, and I'm going to prove your innocence. Emma, you can't. It's too dangerous. Whoever set me up, they're willing to commit murder. I won't have you risking yourself. You don't get to make that choice for me. She squeezed his fingers. I love you, Colton Hayes. I should have said it last night, but I'm saying it now. I love you, and I'm not going to let them take you from me. His eyes closed, pain etched in every line of his face. When he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. I love you too. God help me. I love you too. That's why you need to leave, need to save yourself. The only thing I need is to save you. She released his hand, stepped back before she lost her nerve. I'll be back soon, with proof. She walked out of the jail, past Sheriff Harlow's knowing look, back into the chaos of Main Street. People stared, whispered, pointed. Emma heard every word, shameless, brazen, murderer's lover, and didn't care. She had work to do. Her first stop was the Silver Spur, Luther's saloon. It was closed, a black wreath on the door, but Emma could see movement inside. She tried the door, locked. She knocked, hard and insistent. A face appeared in the window. Pete, Luther's man from that day in the Lucky Dollar. He looked haggard, frightened. After a moment's hesitation, he opened the door a crack. Miss Clark, you shouldn't be here. I need to talk to you, Pete, about Mr. Grant's murder. I got nothing to say to you. Please, just 5 minutes. Emma softened her voice. I know you didn't like what Luther was doing toward the end. I saw it in your eyes that day he grabbed me. You're a decent man caught up in an indecent situation. Help me make it right. Pete's resolve wavered. He glanced over his shoulder, then opened the door wider. 5 minutes. That's all. Inside, the Silver Spur was dim and smelled of stale beer and cigar smoke. Pete led her to a table in the corner, as far from the windows as possible. What do you want to know? Who hated Luther enough to kill him? Pete laughed, the sound bitter. Shorter list would be who didn't hate him. Luther made enemies like other men make friends. But who hated him enough to frame Colton Hayes for it? Now that's the question, ain't it? Pete leaned back, studying her. You really love him, Hayes? Yes, and he didn't kill your boss. I know that. Hayes is a lot of things, but he's a straight shooter. If he wanted Luther dead, he'd have faced him in the street, not shot him in the back in his own office. Pete pulled out a cigarette, lit it with shaking hands, but proving that's going to be near impossible. Whoever did this knew what they were doing, knew how to make it look like Hayes was guilty. Who found the body? I did. Came in this morning to open up, found Luther slumped over his desk, 2 bullets in his chest, Hayes's gloves on the floor next to him. Pete shuddered. There was a note, too, clutched in Luther's hand. Emma's pulse quickened. A note? The sheriff didn't mention a note. He wouldn't. It's evidence. But I saw it before Harlow took it. Just 3 words. You were warned. Warned about what? That's what I can't figure. Luther never mentioned being threatened, being scared of anyone. He was the one doing the threatening, usually. Pete looked at her through the smoke. But there's something else. Something strange. What? The office was locked from the inside. I had to get the spare key from Luther's room upstairs. When I opened the door, the window was latched from the inside, too. It's like whoever killed him just vanished. Emma's mind raced. A locked room. A planted note. Hayes's gloves conveniently left behind. This wasn't just murder. It was theater, carefully staged to tell a specific story. Pete, I need to see the office. The crime scene. Can't do that, Miss Clark. Sheriff's got it sealed off. And besides, I could lose my job. He stopped, laughed bitterly. What am I saying? Luther's dead. I don't have a job anymore. None of us do. Please. You said yourself Hayes didn't do this. Help me prove it. Pete was quiet for a long moment, warring with himself. Then he stood, pulled out a key ring. 10 minutes. That's all I can give you. And if anyone asks, you broke in. I don't know nothing about it. The office was exactly as Pete had described, locked, sealed, untouched except for the removal of Luther's body. Emma stepped inside, her heart pounding, and tried to see what the sheriff had seen. The desk was massive, mahogany, expensive. Luther's blood stained the leather blotter where he'd fallen. The chair was pushed back, suggesting he'd stood at some point, maybe tried to run. 2 bullet holes in his chest, Pete had said. Quick, efficient, deadly. Colton's gloves lay on the floor, exactly where they'd been found. Emma picked them up, studied them. They were dusty, worn. The gloves Colton wore for ranch work. He'd complained about losing them when they were rounding up cattle, had mentioned he'd need to buy a new pair. Someone had found them, kept them, used them. Emma moved to the window. Latched from the inside, Pete had said. She examined the latch. It was secure, undisturbed. No sign of forced entry. She looked out at the alley below. A straight drop, 2 stories. No ledge, no handhold. The killer couldn't have escaped that way, which left the door. But the door had been locked from the inside. Unless... Emma crossed to the door, examined it closely. The lock was simple, the kind that could be turned with a key from either side. She knelt, studying the keyhole, and found what she was looking for, a tiny scratch, fresh, in the brass around the mechanism. Someone had locked the door from the outside using a key, making it look like it had been locked from within. It was clever, almost foolproof, but they'd been careless, left that one tiny mark. Find anything? Pete asked from the doorway. Maybe. Pete, who else has a key to this office? Just Luther and me, and now the sheriff, I suppose. Could anyone have made a copy, stolen yours, made an impression? Pete's face went pale. My keys were missing for a day last week. I thought I'd just misplaced them, found them in my coat pocket the next morning. But if someone took them, had time to make copies, then they could have locked the door from the outside, made it look impossible. Emma stood, her mind working furiously. Who had access to your coat? Who was here that day? Half the town. Luther was having a meeting with his business partners talking about expanding into Abilene. There must have been a dozen men in and out of here. Pete rubbed his face. Could have been any of them. I need names. Everyone who was here that day. Pete rattled off names, and Emma committed them to memory. Most were small-time businessmen, saloon owners from neighboring towns, men with interests in Luther's various enterprises. But one name made her stop cold. Wait, Frank Dooley was here? Yeah, surprised me too, seeing as he works for Hayes. But he and Luther had some kind of business together, something about water rights on the boundary between their properties. Emma's stomach dropped. Frank, Colton's foreman, the man who'd apologized to her, who'd pledged to help find the real killer. Frank had access to the ranch, to Colton's things. Frank could have taken the gloves, could have made copies of Pete's keys, but why? What did Frank have to gain from Luther's death? Pete, what was Luther's relationship with Frank like? Contentious. They argued that day, actually. Luther wanted Frank to convince Hayes to sell some land, and Frank refused, said his loyalty was to Hayes, not to money. Luther didn't take it well. What did he say? Something about how loyalty to Hayes was a fool's errand, how Hayes was going down one way or another. Pete's eyes widened as he realized what he was saying. You think Luther was planning something? Something against Hayes? I think Luther's been planning against Colton for years. Ever since Catherine chose Colton over him. Emma moved to the desk, started going through the drawers. Most were empty now, contents taken as evidence. But in the bottom drawer, hidden under a false bottom, she found a leather journal. She opened it, scanned the pages. It was a record of sorts, dates, times, transactions, and running through it all like a poisonous thread were references to the Hayes problem. May 15th. Spoke with Dooley about water rights. Man's too loyal. Need to find another angle. June 3rd. The Clark girl arrived at Lucky Dollar. Interesting. Hayes has always had a weakness for strays. June 10. Plan forming. If I can't break Hayes's empire, I'll break his heart. Make him fall for the girl, then take her away. Or better yet, make him destroy himself trying to save her. August 2nd. Everything in place. Once Hayes is arrested, the town will demand justice. With him gone, his land becomes available, and I'll be there to snap it up for pennies on the dollar. Emma's hands shook as she read. Luther had orchestrated everything, from the beginning, from the moment he'd first seen her with Colton. He'd turned her into a weapon, used her as bait, planned for months to destroy the man he'd hated for decades. But the final entry, dated 2 days before Luther's death, made her blood run cold. Dooley's agreed. For $10,000 and a piece of the Hayes land, he'll make sure Colton hangs for my murder. Everything's arranged. Tomorrow night, I die a martyr, and Hayes dies a murderer. Justice, at last, for Catherine. Emma stared at the words, horror and understanding crashing over her. Frank Dooley. The loyal foreman, the man who'd worked for Colton for 10 years, who'd sworn to protect the ranch in Colton's absence. Frank had killed Luther Grant, and he'd done it to frame Colton for murder. But why would Frank agree? $10,000 was a fortune, yes, and a piece of Hayes land was valuable. But to betray a man he'd served for a decade, to condemn him to hang, what kind of man did that? A desperate man, Emma realized. A man with debts, perhaps, or a secret worth killing for. Pete, I need to borrow this journal. It's evidence. You can't just take evidence from a crime scene. I can if it proves Colton's innocence. Emma clutched the journal to her chest. This shows premeditation, shows that Luther planned his own death. The sheriff needs to see this. And he will. But if you walk out of here with that, you'll be arrested for tampering with evidence. Let me take it to Harlow. I found it, I'll say. He'll believe me. Emma hesitated, then nodded. Pete was right. She had no credibility in this town, no authority. But Pete, as Luther's employee, had every right to be going through his boss's things. Take it to him now and tell him to arrest Frank Dooley before he runs. Pete took the journal, his face grim. Frank Dooley. Never would have guessed. He seemed like a straight shooter. Luther knew how to find a man's price. Everyone has one. Emma headed for the door. I need to get back to the ranch, warn the others. Miss Clark, wait. Pete's voice stopped her. There's one more thing. The note that was in Luther's hand. You were warned? I think I know what it means. What? Luther had been getting threats, anonymous letters, someone telling him to leave Hayes alone, to stop his schemes. He laughed them off, said it was probably Hayes himself trying to scare him. But what if it wasn't Hayes? What if it was Dooley, trying to warn Luther that he was in over his head? Emma's mind raced. If Frank had been warning Luther, trying to get him to back out of the plan, and Luther refused, maybe Frank had killed him to keep himself safe, to silence the one person who could expose his treachery. It made a terrible kind of sense. Get that journal to the sheriff, Emma said. I'm going back to the ranch. She rode hard, pushing Daisy faster than was probably wise. The sun was high now, the day bright and clear. But in Emma's mind, storm clouds gathered. Frank Dooley was at the ranch, with the other men, with access to guns and horses, and any number of ways to disappear before the law could catch him. And if he realized Emma knew the truth, if he felt cornered, Emma urged Daisy faster. She was a mile from the ranch when she saw the smoke. Not a lot at first, just a thin column rising from beyond the next hill. But as she crested the rise, her heart stopped. The barn was burning. Flames licked at the wooden structure, sending black smoke billowing into the clear sky. She could hear cattle bellowing in panic, see ranch hands running with buckets, fighting a losing battle against the fire. And standing apart from it all, watching the chaos with cold satisfaction, was Frank Dooley. Emma didn't think. She rode straight for him, fury overwhelming caution. Frank turned at the sound of hoofbeats, his eyes widening when he saw her. Miss Clark, thank God you're here. The barn just went up. We think it was an ember from the forge. Liar. Emma dismounted, her voice shaking with rage. You set this fire, just like you killed Luther Grant, just like you've been sabotaging this ranch for months. Frank's expression shifted, the concerned foreman replaced by something cold and calculating. Careful, Miss Clark. That's a serious accusation. I found Luther's journal. I know about your deal, about the $10,000, about everything. Emma was aware of the other ranch hands stopping their work, gathering closer, listening. You killed him to frame Colton. You set this fire to destroy what's left of his property while he's locked away. You're a traitor, Frank Dooley, a murderer. For a moment, Frank looked like he might deny it. Then his hand moved to his gun. You should have stayed in town, Miss Clark. Should have kept your pretty nose out of things that don't concern you. Tom stepped forward, his own hand on his weapon. Frank, what the hell are you doing? Collecting what's owed to me. I've worked this ranch for 10 years, broken my back for Hayes, and what do I have to show for it? Wages barely enough to live on while he sits in his big house, mourning his dead wife, getting richer every year. Frank's voice was bitter, years of resentment spilling out. Luther offered me a way out, a way to finally get what I deserve. By murdering him? By framing an innocent man? Emma took a step forward. You're pathetic, Frank. A coward who couldn't face Colton man to man, so you hid behind schemes and lies. Frank's gun cleared leather. Call me what you want. Won't matter when you're dead. The shot rang out, but it didn't come from Frank's gun. Frank staggered, clutched his shoulder where blood bloomed dark against his shirt. His gun fell from nerveless fingers. And behind him, lowering her rifle, stood old Martha Wilson from the Lucky Dollar, her face grim. Nobody threatens my girl, Martha said. Not while I'm breathing. Chaos erupted. Tom and the others rushed Frank, disarmed him, held him down while he cursed and struggled. Emma ran to Martha, who'd apparently followed her from town. Martha, how did you... Heard you were stirring up trouble, figured you might need backup. Good thing, too. Martha's hands were steady on her rifle. This the man who killed Luther? Yes, and he's going to hang for it. Emma turned to Tom. Someone ride to town, get the sheriff. Tell him we have Luther Grant's real killer, and we have the evidence to prove it. As Tom mounted up and rode hard for Red Rock, Emma looked at the burning barn, at Frank bleeding and cursing on the ground, at the ranch hands who'd stood ready to defend her. The fire was spreading, but it could be contained. The damage could be repaired. and Colton could come home. Sheriff Harlow arrived an hour later with a deputy and Pete, who carried Luther's journal. Frank, his shoulder bandaged and his spirit broken, confessed everything: the deal with Luther, the murder, the frame job, the sabotage. He'd been drowning in gambling debts, he said. Luther had offered him a fortune and a fresh start. All he had to do was kill a man who'd never done him wrong and betray a boss who'd trusted him for a decade. Greed, Harlow said, shaking his head as his deputy led Frank away, makes men do terrible things. Will Colton be released? Emma asked. Soon as we get this sorted officially. The journal, Frank's confession, the evidence of the locked room trick, it's enough to clear Hayes completely. Harlow looked at Emma with something like respect. You did good work here, Miss Clark. Solved a murder the law might never have cracked. I just wanted to save the man I love. Well, you did that. Harlow tipped his hat to her. He's a lucky man, Hayes. I hope he knows it. Emma rode back to town as the sun began to set, her body aching, her mind exhausted, but her heart lighter than it had been in days. The barn could be rebuilt, the cattle could be replaced. Frank's betrayal would sting, but the ranch would survive. And Colton was free. She found him on the steps of the sheriff's office, just released, looking dazed in the golden evening light. When he saw her, his face transformed. Emma! She ran to him, and he caught her, lifted her off her feet, held her like he'd never let go. You did it. You actually did it. We did it. She pulled back enough to see his face. Colton, I'm so sorry about Frank. Frank made his choice. I'm just grateful you weren't hurt. His hands framed her face, his eyes searching hers. When I heard about the fire, about you confronting him with a gun, Emma, you could have been killed. But I wasn't, and you're free. That's all that matters. He kissed her then, right there on Main Street, in front of the sheriff's office, in full view of anyone who cared to watch. And Emma kissed him back, shameless and sure, because she was done hiding, done caring what the world thought. When they finally broke apart, Colton rested his forehead against hers. Marry me. Emma's breath caught. What? Marry me, Emma Clark. Not because we have to, not because of scandal or reputation or what people will say. Marry me because I love you, because you're the bravest, most stubborn, most remarkable woman I've ever known. Marry me because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks. Yes, I'll marry you. He kissed her again, and this time when they broke apart, Emma saw that a small crowd had gathered. Some faces were disapproving, some shocked, some, like old Tom and Martha, were smiling. And in the back, wearing a traveling suit and a knowing expression, stood Margaret Ashford. She approached slowly, her eyes on Emma and Colton's joined hands. Well, I see you've made your choice, Miss Clark. I have, Emma said steadily. I know you think it's foolish. Foolish, perhaps. Margaret's stern expression softened into something almost like a smile. But then, the best things in life usually are. Catherine would have approved, I think. She always said Colton needed someone who wouldn't break under pressure, someone who'd fight for him as fiercely as he fought for everyone else. She looked at Colton. You've found that, it seems. Try not to waste it this time. I won't, Colton promised. I've learned my lesson about taking second chances for granted. Margaret nodded, seemingly satisfied. Then I suppose I should congratulate you both and offer my services as matron of honor, if you'll have me. Emma blinked in surprise. You'd do that? After everything you said? I said you were making a mistake. I didn't say I wouldn't support you through it. Margaret's smile turned wry. Besides, someone needs to make sure you two actually make it to the altar without causing another scandal. Colton laughed, the sound free and genuine. We'd be honored to have you, Margaret. As they stood there, Colton and Emma, Margaret and Martha, Tom and the gathering townspeople, Emma felt something shift in the air. The whispers were still there, the judgment, the shock, but underneath it all was something else. Acceptance, perhaps. Or at least acknowledgement that love, in whatever form it took, was stronger than scandal. The battle wasn't over. Red Rock would talk for years about the saloon girl and the rancher, about the murder and the betrayal, about everything that had happened. But Emma didn't care anymore. She had Colton, she had a future. She had people who stood with her, and that, she realized, was worth any price the world demanded. They rode back to the ranch together as darkness fell, and this time when Emma crossed the threshold of the Hayes house, it wasn't as a housekeeper or an employee or a temporary guest. It was as the future Mrs. Hayes, as home. The weeks that followed Luther's death and Frank's arrest brought a strange peace to the Hayes ranch. The barn was rebuilt with help from neighboring ranchers who, whatever they thought of Colton and Emma's relationship, respected a man wrongly accused and a woman brave enough to prove his innocence. The cattle were rounded up, the fences repaired, and slowly, the ranch returned to its rhythm of seasons and work. But Emma knew that the real challenge wasn't rebuilding structures or recovering livestock. It was navigating the delicate space between scandal and respectability, between the life they wanted and the life society demanded. Margaret stayed on, ostensibly to help plan the wedding, but Emma suspected it was more to act as chaperone and shield against the worst of the gossip. True to her word, she threw herself into the preparations with military efficiency, writing letters to Austin for proper dress fabric, consulting with the minister, arranging everything with the precision of a general planning a campaign. "You need to understand," Margaret told Emma one afternoon as they sat in the parlor with pattern books spread across the table, "that this wedding isn't just about you and Colton. It's a statement to Red Rock, to the county, to everyone who's whispered about you both. It needs to be done properly, respectably, without a hint of shame." Emma looked up from the ivory silk samples Margaret had insisted were essential. "But there will always be whispers, Margaret. We can't control what people think." "No, but we can control what they see." Margaret's finger tapped a particularly elegant pattern. "This one. Simple but refined. Nothing too ostentatious. You're not trying to play the grand lady. But nothing too plain either, or they'll say Colton's ashamed of you." "Are you sure you wouldn't rather just dress me in armor?" Emma asked wryly. Margaret's lips twitched. "If I thought it would help, I would. But armor doesn't work against gossip." She softened slightly. "Emma, I know this seems excessive, but I've watched society destroy women for less than what you've done. If we present you as a proper bride, if we show the town that Colton values you enough to do this right, then at least some of the poison will lose its sting." Emma reached across the table, squeezed Margaret's hand. "Thank you. For staying, for helping, for not giving up on us. Well, someone has to keep you two from making a complete hash of things." But Margaret's eyes were warm. Besides, Catherine would have wanted this, would have wanted to see Colton happy again. The mention of Catherine should have felt like a shadow falling across the room, but somehow it didn't. Catherine's photographs still graced the mantel and side tables, but they no longer felt like accusations. They felt like memories, bittersweet, but no longer suffocating. Colton had started sleeping in the house again, though in deference to Margaret's presence and propriety's demands, he kept to his own room while Emma kept to hers. But sometimes, late at night, Emma would hear her door open softly, feel the mattress dip as Colton slid in beside her. "We shouldn't," she'd whisper, even as she turned into his embrace. "I know," he'd murmur against her hair, "but I can't stay away." They'd lie together in the darkness, talking in hushed voices about the future, about the ranch, about the life they were building. And before dawn, Colton would slip back to his own room, leaving Emma with the warmth of his presence and the promise of their coming marriage. It was during one of these stolen nights that Colton finally told her the full story of Catherine. "I loved her," he said quietly, his fingers tracing patterns on Emma's shoulder, "but not the way I love you. With Catherine, it was admiration, I suppose. Fascination. She was everything I wasn't, refined, educated, comfortable in social situations I found suffocating. I thought if I could win her, if I could bring her here and build her a grand house, I could somehow become worthy of the life she represented. But she couldn't be happy here," Emma said. "No. And I couldn't be happy trying to be someone I wasn't. We were both chasing versions of each other that didn't exist." His arm tightened around Emma. "The worst part was, I knew. Knew she was miserable, knew the isolation was killing her spirit, but I was too proud to admit failure, too stubborn to let her go back to Austin where she belonged. So I told myself that love would be enough, that eventually she'd adjust, that I was giving her everything she needed." You were giving her everything but what she actually wanted. Yes, and by the time I realized it, by the time I was ready to let her go, to sell the ranch and move to Austin if that's what it took, she was already sick, already dying. His voice roughened. The last thing she said to me was, "I'm sorry." She was apologizing to me for dying, for not being strong enough to survive this life I'd forced on her. Emma rolled to face him, cupped his scarred cheek in her palm. "It wasn't your fault, Colton. You couldn't have known. You did the best you could with what you understood at the time." Did I? Or did I just do what I wanted and dress it up as love? He caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "That's why I was so afraid with you, why I kept trying to push you away. I couldn't bear the thought of repeating my mistakes, of taking another woman and molding her into something that would destroy her. But I'm not Catherine. I don't need to be molded or shaped or turned into something I'm not." Emma's voice was fierce. "I love this ranch, Colton. I love the work, the land, the rhythm of the seasons. I love the person I am here, the person I'm becoming. You didn't force me into this life. You gave me the freedom to choose it. I know, and that's the difference, isn't it? That's what I didn't understand before." He pulled her close, breathed in the scent of her hair. Choice. Catherine never really chose this life. She chose me, or the idea of me, but not this. You chose all of it, knowing exactly what you were getting. "I chose you," Emma corrected softly. "Everything else was just details." They fell silent then, holding each other in the darkness. Two people scarred by their pasts, but reaching toward a future neither had dared to imagine. As October deepened into November, the wedding preparations accelerated. Margaret had somehow convinced the minister of the First Baptist Church, the same church whose congregation had whispered about Emma, to perform the ceremony. It took some doing, Emma suspected, and probably involved Margaret's considerable social weight and possibly a generous donation to the church building fund. "He's agreed," Margaret announced one morning at breakfast, setting down her teacup with satisfaction. "November 30th, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The church will be decorated with autumn flowers, and afterward we'll have a small reception here at the house." Colton looked up from his eggs. 2 o'clock? "Margaret, that doesn't give the ranch hands time to clean up after morning work." "The ranch hands aren't invited to the ceremony itself, just the reception afterward." "What?" Colton's fork clattered to his plate. "Margaret, these men stood by me when I was accused of murder. Tom, Martha, the others, their family. I'm not getting married without them there." "Colton, be reasonable. The church congregation is barely tolerating this wedding as it is. If you fill the pews with cowboys and saloon workers, you'll undermine everything we're trying to accomplish." "What we're trying to accomplish is get married, not stage a performance for people whose opinions I don't value." Emma watched them argue, feeling the familiar weight of impossible choices. She wanted Colton to have the wedding he deserved, wanted the people who'd stood by them to witness their vows. But she also understood Margaret's point, that every detail of this wedding would be scrutinized, judged, used as ammunition by those who wanted to see them fail. "What if we compromise?" she said quietly. Both Margaret and Colton turned to her. "We have the ceremony at the church, small and proper, with whoever the congregation deems acceptable. But afterward we have a second celebration here. A real one, with everyone who matters to us. The ranch hands, Martha, anyone who wants to come. We make the church ceremony about satisfying society and the ranch celebration about us." Margaret considered this. It could work. 2 separate events, each serving its purpose. The church ceremony gives you respectability, the ranch celebration gives you authenticity. Colton reached across the table, took Emma's hand. "You sure you want to do this? Play their game?" "I'm sure I want to marry you. If playing their game for an hour gets us there, then it's worth it." She squeezed his fingers. "Besides, the ranch celebration is the one I'll actually remember, the one that matters." And so it was decided. The church ceremony would be small, formal, attended by Red Rock's respectable citizens, and overseen by Margaret's exacting standards. The ranch celebration would be everything the church ceremony wasn't: loud, joyful, real. But first, Emma needed a dress. Margaret had ordered fabric from Austin, but it was Emma who sat with the seamstress, a quiet woman named Mrs. Chen, who'd come to Texas from San Francisco and set up shop in Red Rock, despite the town's suspicion of outsiders. "You want simple," Mrs. Chen said. her measuring tape moving with practiced efficiency. But not too simple. Want to show you're a lady, but not trying too hard to be one. Exactly. Emma stood still as Mrs. Chen pinned and measured. I don't want to look like I'm pretending to be something I'm not. Smart girl. Mrs. Chen stepped back, studied Emma critically. You have good bones, good posture. We make you a dress that shows this. Ivory silk, fitted bodice, simple skirt, no fuss, no frills, just clean lines and good fabric. That sounds perfect. Mrs. Chen smiled, the first real warmth Emma had seen from her. You're braver than most women I know. Not many would face this town the way you have. I don't feel brave. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding myself together. Bravery isn't not being scared. Bravery is being scared and doing it anyway. Mrs. Chen resumed her work, pinning fabric with quick, sure movements. You love him, Mr. Hayes? More than I thought it was possible to love anyone. Then the rest doesn't matter. Let them talk. Let them judge. You have love, and that's more than most of them will ever know. The words stayed with Emma as she left the seamstress shop, as she walked through Red Rock streets feeling the weight of eyes and whispers. Mrs. Chen was right. She had love. Real, solid, tested love. What did the rest matter against that? But the rest did matter in small, cutting ways that accumulated like paper cuts. The church ladies who crossed the street to avoid her, the shopkeeper who suddenly couldn't find the items she needed, the children who stared and pointed until their mothers pulled them away. Even kindness felt barbed sometimes. Mrs. Ashford, the banker's wife, who'd once called her shameless, now spoke to her with brittle politeness that was somehow worse than outright hostility. Emma endured it all with her head high and her expression serene, but at night, alone in her room before Colton's secret visits, she sometimes allowed herself to cry. Not from regret, she'd choose this path again in a heartbeat, but from the sheer exhaustion of being constantly judged, constantly on display, constantly having to prove her worth to people who'd already decided she had none. It was Martha who found her one such night, sitting on the porch steps with tears streaming down her face. Oh, honey, Martha sat beside her, pulled Emma's head onto her shoulder. Let it out. No shame in crying. I'm so tired, Martha. Tired of fighting, tired of proving myself, tired of caring what they think while pretending I don't. I know. Martha stroked Emma's hair like a mother would. But you're almost there. Just a few more weeks, and you'll be Mrs. Hayes. Legal, proper, respectable. And then let them try to look down on you. They'll still find a way. I'll always be the saloon girl who trapped Colton Hayes. Let them think what they want. You and I know the truth. That boy was drowning in grief until you came along. You didn't trap him. You saved him. Martha pulled back, looked Emma in the eye. And you know what else? Every woman in this town wishes she had what you have. A man who looks at her like she hung the moon. A man who'd face down a mob for her. A man who'd give up his pride and his reputation just to keep her safe. That's why they hate you, Emma. Not because you're a saloon girl, because you won. Emma laughed through her tears. Won what? Everything they want and can't have. Real love, real passion, real life. Martha stood, helped Emma to her feet. Now wipe those tears and get some sleep. You've got a wedding to prepare for, and I'll be damned if you walk down that aisle looking anything less than triumphant. The day of the wedding dawned cold and clear, the kind of November morning where frost painted the grass silver and breath came in visible clouds. Emma woke in her room at the ranch, the last morning she'd wake here unmarried, and allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. 6 weeks ago, she'd been a saloon girl with no prospects and a ruined reputation. Now she was about to marry the richest man in the county, to become mistress of this ranch, to claim a future she'd never dared to dream possible. The transformation should have felt impossible. Instead, it felt inevitable, like every hard moment, every humiliation, every small victory had been leading her here. Margaret swept in with breakfast on a tray and a schedule that would make a general proud. Eat. Then we start your toilette. The carriage leaves for town at noon sharp, which gives us 3 hours to make you presentable. Only 3 hours? Emma teased. Better make it 4 to be safe. Margaret's lips twitched. You're in a good mood. I'm getting married. Why wouldn't I be? Most brides are nervous. I'm terrified, Emma admitted, but also happy. Is it possible to be both? Not only possible, but required, I think. Margaret set down the tray, sat on the edge of the bed. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Emma's stomach tightened. All right. Do you love him? Really love him, not just gratitude or obligation or fear of having nowhere else to go? I love him, truly, completely, without reservation. Margaret studied her face, searching for deception and finding none. Good. Because the life you're choosing, it won't be easy. The gossip will continue, maybe forever. There will always be people who see you as less than, who judge you for your past. You need to be sure that Colton is worth that price. He is. And Margaret? Emma met her eyes steadily. This isn't about choosing the easy path or the hard one. It's about choosing the true one. The one that makes me who I'm meant to be. Colton is part of that truth. This ranch is part of it. Even the struggle is part of it. I'm more myself here, fighting for this life, than I ever was trying to survive in Red Rock. Margaret nodded slowly, something like approval in her eyes. Then let's make you a bride worthy of that truth. The transformation took exactly 3 hours. Martha arrived to help, along with Mrs. Chen with the finished dress. They bathed Emma, styled her hair in an elegant updo with a few loose curls framing her face, applied subtle cosmetics that enhanced rather than masked. The dress was everything Mrs. Chen had promised, simple, elegant, fitted perfectly to Emma's slender frame. The ivory silk caught the light like pearls, and the cut was modern without being scandalous. When Emma looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like a lady, like someone who belonged in a grand house, someone worthy of respect. You're beautiful, Martha said, her voice thick with emotion. Catherine's veil, Margaret said quietly, holding out a length of delicate lace. I brought it from Austin. She'd want you to have it. Emma's breath caught. Margaret, I can't. That's too much. You can, and you will. Catherine would have loved you, Emma, would have appreciated your strength, your resilience, and she'd want Colton to be happy. This is my way of honoring both of you. Margaret's hands were gentle as she arranged the veil. Besides, it's tradition, something old. The dress is new, Martha supplied. The pearls I'm lending you are borrowed. And for something blue, she produced a garter with a small blue ribbon. Handmade by yours truly. Emma looked at these women, Margaret, who'd been so opposed to her at first, Martha, who'd defended her since the beginning, and felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, both of you, for everything. Well, don't you dare cry and ruin that face, Martha ordered, but her own eyes were suspiciously bright. Save the tears for the ceremony. The church was packed when they arrived, every pew filled with Red Rock citizens dressed in their Sunday best. Emma saw Mrs. Ashford in the front row, her face a mask of stiff propriety. Saw the shopkeepers and their wives, the ranchers and their families, all the people who'd whispered about her now gathered to witness her triumph or her downfall, depending on their perspective. But she also saw friendly faces. Old Tom, scrubbed clean and wearing a suit that had probably last seen daylight at a funeral. Some of the ranch hands in the back pews, their presence a quiet act of loyalty. And there, at the altar, standing tall and handsome in a new black suit, was Colton. Their eyes met across the church, and the rest of the world fell away. Emma saw love in his gaze, yes, but also promise, commitment, the vow that whatever came next, they'd face it together. Margaret walked her down the aisle. There was no father to give her away, no family to stand with her, but Margaret's hand was steady on her arm, a silent statement that Emma Clark wasn't alone, wasn't without supporters, wasn't the friendless orphan the town believed her to be. When they reached the altar, Colton took her hand, his grip warm and sure. The minister began the ceremony, his voice echoing in the vaulted space, speaking of love and honor and faithfulness. Emma heard the words distantly, too focused on Colton's face, on the reality of this moment to fully process the traditional phrases. But when it came time for the vows, she spoke clearly, her voice steady and sure. I, Emma Clark, take you, Colton Hayes, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. Colton's vows were equally firm, his deep voice carrying through the church. I, Colton Hayes, take you, Emma Clark, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. This I pledge before God and these witnesses. The rings, simple gold bands that had been Catherine's idea, Margaret had told her, a match set bought long ago, slid onto their fingers. And then the minister was pronouncing them husband and wife, and Colton was lifting her veil and kissing her, and the church erupted in polite applause. They walked back down the aisle together, and Emma saw tears on Martha's face, approval on Margaret's, satisfaction on Tom's. But she also saw doubt, judgment, whispered conversations behind gloved hands. The town of Red Rock had witnessed her wedding, but they hadn't changed their minds about her. And Emma realized with sudden clarity that she didn't care. Let them doubt. Let them whisper. She was Emma Hayes now, wife to the man she loved, mistress of a ranch she was helping to build, a woman who'd proven her courage and her worth. Their opinions couldn't touch that truth. The reception at the ranch was everything the church ceremony wasn't. Tom had organized the hands to set up tables in the yard, and somehow they'd gathered food, roasted beef, fresh bread, pies, and cakes, contributed by neighbors who might not approve, but who respected the tradition of celebrating a wedding. Someone had brought a fiddle, another a guitar, and soon music filled the air. Emma changed from her wedding dress into a simpler gown, one she could actually move in, and joined the celebration. She danced with Colton, with Tom, with ranch hands who bowed awkwardly and stepped on her toes. She laughed with Martha, toasted with Margaret, accepted congratulations from gruff cowboys who admitted they'd been wrong about her. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, Colton pulled her aside into the quiet of the newly rebuilt barn. The smell of fresh lumber and hay surrounded them, and through the open doors they could see the celebration continuing. "Happy?" he asked, his arms around her waist. Deliriously. Emma leaned into him, though I suspect we've scandalized half of Red Rock. Only half? I'm disappointed. I was aiming for at least 3/4. His smile faded into something more serious. Emma, I need to tell you something. About this ranch, about our future. Her heart clenched. What is it? I've been thinking about what you said, about choice, about how Catherine never really chose this life, but you did. He took a breath. I want you to have choices too, real ones. So I've set up an account in your name, money that's yours alone. Enough that if you ever want to leave, if this life ever becomes too much, you can. No questions, no obligations, just freedom. Emma stared at him, processing what he was saying. He was giving her an escape route, even now, even after they were married, giving her the power to walk away if she wanted to. Colton Hayes, you are the most frustrating, wonderful, impossible man. She cupped his face in her hands. I don't want an escape route. I don't need one. I chose this life, chose you, and I'm not going anywhere. But, her voice softened. Thank you for trusting me with that choice, for understanding that love isn't about trapping someone, it's about setting them free. And you choose to stay? Every day for the rest of my life, I'll choose to stay. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, a kiss that tasted of promise and forever. When they broke apart, both breathless, Colton rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Emma Hayes. I love you too. They stood there in the barn, holding each other while outside the celebration continued, and Emma felt something click into place. This was home. Not just the ranch or the house, but this, being held by someone who loved her, choosing each day to build a life together, finding peace in the midst of struggle. The months that followed brought new rhythms to the Hayes ranch. Emma threw herself into making the house a true home, not the shrine to Catherine it had been, but a living space that reflected both her and Colton. She kept some of Catherine's things, the pieces that had beauty or meaning, but she added her own touches too. Her mother's Bible on the mantle, wildflowers in mason jars, Curtains she'd sewn herself in cheerful calico instead of Catherine's heavy brocade. The ranch prospered. With Frank's betrayal exposed, Colton hired a new foreman, a grizzled veteran named Jack Monroe, who'd worked with Colton years ago in Abilene. Jack was fair, competent, and utterly uninterested in the gossip about Emma's past. "Don't care where a person comes from," he told her gruffly. "Only care where they're going." Emma found her own role on the ranch. She wasn't content to be just a housewife, and Colton didn't expect her to be. She learned the books, helped manage the accounts, discovered she had a head for numbers and business. She learned to ride properly, to help with roundups when extra hands were needed. She planted a garden, not the pretentious formal garden Catherine had attempted, but a practical kitchen garden that fed the household in the hands. Red Rock slowly, grudgingly, began to accept her. It helped that she was now legally married, respectable in the eyes of the law, if not the church ladies. It helped that she conducted herself with dignity, never responding to provocations, never sinking to the level of those who still whispered. And it helped that the ranch continued to thrive under her and Colton's partnership, providing employment and contributing to the town's economy. But acceptance came at a cost Emma hadn't fully anticipated. Mrs. Ashford began inviting her to teas, making it clear that as Mrs. Hayes, Emma had social obligations to fulfill. Emma found herself sitting in parlors with women who'd once called her shameless, making polite conversation about weather and recipes, pretending the past had never happened. "I hate it," she confessed to Colton one night. "Sitting there, drinking tea with women who despise me, pretending everything's fine." "Then don't go," Colton said simply. "You don't owe them anything." "But I owe you. Your reputation, your business relationships. If I snub the town's leading ladies, it could hurt the ranch." "The ranch will survive. Your happiness matters more." "Does it? Or are we just repeating the pattern with Catherine, where your desires override practical concerns?" Colton pulled back, stung. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You say my happiness matters, but what about the ranch's success? What about our future? What about the children we might have someday, who'll need this community's acceptance?" Emma softened, touched his cheek. "I'm not Catherine, Colton. I'm not going to wither from a few uncomfortable teas. But I need you to acknowledge that sometimes doing what's right for us means doing things we'd rather not." He was quiet for a long moment. "You're right. I'm sorry. I keep trying so hard not to repeat my mistakes with Catherine that I'm not seeing you clearly, not seeing what you need, what you're strong enough to handle. What I need is for you to trust that I know my own limits. If the teas become truly unbearable, I'll stop going. But for now, for the sake of our future, I can endure a few hours of Mrs. Ashford's company." "You're remarkable, you know that?" Emma laughed. "I'm practical. There's a difference." But the teas did serve a purpose beyond social obligation. Through careful listening and strategic questions, Emma began to understand Red Rock's true power structures. Mrs. Ashford might rule the social sphere, but her husband controlled the bank. The minister's wife had surprising influence over her husband's sermons. The widow Peterson, quiet and unassuming, was the one everyone turned to for advice. Emma filed away these observations, understanding that knowledge was power. If she was going to truly belong in Red Rock, if she was going to protect her and Colton's interests, she needed to understand how the town really worked. It was during one of these teas in March of the following year that Emma learned she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks. Her monthly courses had stopped. She'd been tired and queasy in the mornings. But it was Mrs. Peterson, the widow, who confirmed it with a knowing look and a quiet word. "You have the glow, dear, and I noticed you didn't touch the oysters. When do you think it happened?" Emma did quick mental calculations. "January, probably. Maybe late December." Mrs. Peterson smiled. "A fall baby, then. How lovely. Have you told Mr. Hayes?" "Not yet. I wanted to be sure." "Oh, you're sure. Trust me, I've seen enough women in your condition to know." Mrs. Peterson patted her hand. "This is wonderful news, Emma. A baby will cement your place here, make even the staunchest critics accept you as a permanent part of Red Rock society." Emma wasn't sure how she felt about that, the idea that a baby would be her ticket to acceptance, as if growing a child were just another social strategy. But she couldn't deny the flutter of joy, of anticipation. A baby. Her and Colton's child. a new life built from their love. She told him that night, in their bed with moonlight streaming through the windows. "Colton, I'm pregnant." He went very still. For a moment, Emma feared his reaction, feared the memories of Catherine, of loss, of all the ways bringing a child into this world could go wrong. Then he rolled to face her, his hand settling gently on her still flat stomach, and she saw wonder in his eyes. "Pregnant. We're going to have a baby." "Yes. In the fall, probably October." October. He said it like he was testing the word, tasting its possibilities. "Emma, are you happy about this? Truly happy?" "I'm terrified and thrilled in equal measure. Is that normal?" "I think it might be." His hand moved in slow circles on her stomach. "I'm scared too. Scared something will go wrong. Scared I'll fail you the way I failed Catherine. You didn't fail Catherine, and you won't fail me or this baby." Emma covered his hand with hers. "We're different, Colton. Stronger. We know what we're walking into, and we have each other." "We do." He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. "God, Emma, I love you. I love you so much, and now there's going to be someone else to love, someone we made together. I love you too." Emma held him tight, feeling the tremor of emotion running through him. "We're going to be all right, all three of us." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through spring and into summer. Emma's body changed, growing round with life, and she found herself both fascinated and frustrated by the transformation. She couldn't ride as easily, couldn't help with the heavy ranch work, had to content herself with lighter tasks and the endless bookkeeping. But she also found unexpected support. Margaret returned from Austin when she heard the news, taking up residence once more in the guest room. "Someone needs to make sure you don't overexert yourself," she declared, though her eyes were soft with emotion. "Besides, I want to be here when my niece or nephew arrives." Martha came by regularly, bringing wisdom gleaned from delivering half the babies in Red Rock over the years. Even Mrs. Ashford, in her stiff way, offered advice on nurseries and layettes and all the necessities of bringing a child into the world. The town's attitude shifted subtly. Emma was no longer just the former saloon girl who'd married Colton Hayes. She was a mother-to-be, a respectable matron, someone investing in Red Rock's future. The whispers didn't stop entirely, but they changed flavor, less vicious, more speculative. Would the baby look like Colton or Emma? Would it be a boy to inherit the ranch or a girl to spoil? Emma endured it all with the same dignity she'd shown since arriving at the ranch. She attended teas when she could, managed the household, supported Colton in his business dealings, and prepared for the baby with a mixture of practicality and wonder. In August, disaster struck. A late summer storm rolled through, bringing lightning and wind that sparked fires across the dry grasslands. The Hayes Ranch lost a section of grazing land, some fencing, and worst of all, a portion of the herd trapped in a box canyon when the fire swept through. Emma stood on the porch, watching the orange glow on the horizon, one hand on her swollen belly. She was 7 months along, too pregnant to help fight the fire, too worried to rest. Colton was out there with the men, battling flames and trying to save what they could. Margaret found her there as dawn broke, still standing vigil. "Come inside, Emma. You'll exhaust yourself." "I can't. Not until he's back safe." "He'll be fine. Colton survived worse than a prairie fire." "Has he?" Emma turned to her, and Margaret saw the fear naked on her face. "Has he survived losing everything while his wife was pregnant? Has he survived building a life only to watch it burn?" Margaret's face softened with understanding. "You're thinking of Catherine, of what she went through, isolated and lonely while Colton built his empire. I'm thinking that history has a terrible way of repeating itself. What if this is how it starts? What if the fire is just the beginning, and we lose the ranch, lose everything, and I end up like Catherine, broken by this life, unable to survive it?" "Emma." Margaret gripped her shoulders, firm and steady. "You are nothing like Catherine. Catherine was a gentle soul, beautiful and kind, but not built for hardship. You? You're steel wrapped in silk. You've survived poverty, scandal, attempted murder. A prairie fire isn't going to break you. But what if it breaks Colton? What if losing the ranch destroys the man I love? Then you'll build him back up, the same way he built you up when you had nothing. That's what marriage is, Emma. Not the romance and the passion, though those are lovely, but the rebuilding, the constant, patient work of putting each other back together when life tries to tear you apart. Emma leaned into Margaret's embrace, taking comfort in her strength. I'm so scared. I know, but being scared doesn't mean you're weak. It means you have something worth protecting. Colton returned 3 hours later, covered in soot and ash, exhausted but alive. Emma flew to him, or as close to flying as she could manage with her pregnant belly, and he caught her, held her, buried his face in her hair. The fire? She asked. Contained. We lost 30 head of cattle, some grazing land. Could have been worse. He pulled back, studied her face. You're all right? The baby? We're fine. Worried but fine. Emma cupped his ash-stained cheek. The ranch. The ranch will recover. It always does. His hand settled on her belly. That's the thing about building something real, Emma. Fire can burn it, drought can starve it, storms can batter it. But as long as the people who love it are still standing, it can always come back. And it did. The ranch hands worked double shifts to repair the damage. Neighbors, even ones who'd been critical of Emma, contributed feed for the surviving cattle, helped rebuild fencing. Red Rock, for all its flaws, took care of its own when disaster struck. By September, the worst of the damage was repaired. The ranch wouldn't have as profitable a year as they'd hoped, but it would survive. Emma, now heavily pregnant and unable to do much beyond manage the household accounts, watched Colton and the men work with a fierce pride. This was what they'd built together. Not just a ranch, not just a marriage, but a life that could weather storms, literal and figurative, and emerge stronger. On October 15th, as autumn painted the hills in gold and crimson, Emma went into labor. It was long, hard work. Fitting, she thought through the pain, that bringing new life into the world should be as much labor as building a ranch or rebuilding a reputation. Martha attended her, with Margaret hovering anxiously and Colton pacing outside the room, barred from entry by tradition and Martha's firm orders. He'll just get in the way, Martha declared. Men always do at birthings. But when the baby finally came, a daughter, small but healthy, with a powerful set of lungs, Martha relented and let Colton in. He stood frozen in the doorway, staring at Emma holding their daughter, his face cycling through more emotions than Emma could count. Then he crossed to the bed, sank down beside them, and touched the baby's tiny hand with one calloused finger. She's perfect, he whispered. She is. Emma was exhausted, wrung out, but filled with a joy so profound it hurt. Do you want to hold her? Colton took their daughter with exquisite care, cradling her like she was made of glass. The baby opened her eyes, dark blue, they'd probably change, and seemed to study her father's face with solemn intensity. Hello, little one, Colton murmured. I'm your father, and I promise you, I'm going to do better by you than I did by your mother at first. I'm going to love you, protect you, and give you the freedom to choose your own path, whatever that path is. Emma's eyes filled with tears. This was what she'd hoped for, what she'd dreamed of in those dark days in the saloon when hope seemed impossible. A family, love, a future. What should we name her? Colton asked. Emma had thought about this, had a suggestion ready. Hope. I want to name her Hope. Colton looked at her, understanding dawning. For the future. For the future, Emma agreed, and for the past, for everything we survived to get here. Hope Hayes. He tested the name, smiled. It's perfect. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her stern expression melting when she saw the baby. May I? Colton carefully transferred Hope to Margaret's arms. The older woman looked down at the infant, and Emma saw tears tracking down her cheeks. She has Catherine's eyes, Margaret whispered. The shape of them, anyway. And your stubborn chin, Colton. She looked at Emma. You did well, my dear. Very well indeed. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings, of learning to be a mother while still being a wife and a rancher, and all the other roles Emma had taken on. But through it all, she felt a contentment she'd never known before. This was her life. Not the one she'd been born to, not the one circumstances had forced on her, but the one she'd chosen. The one she'd fought for, bled for, nearly died for. And it was beautiful. Red Rock, slowly but surely, completed its transformation in how it viewed Emma. The former saloon girl was gone, replaced by Mrs. Emma Hayes, mother, rancher's wife, pillar of the community whether the community wanted to admit it or not. She still wasn't invited to the most exclusive gatherings, still heard whispers occasionally, but the poison had been drawn. She'd proven herself through her marriage, her strength, her baby, and even Red Rock's most critical citizens had to acknowledge it. On a crisp November afternoon, exactly 1 year after her wedding, Emma stood in her garden with Hope on her hip, watching Colton and the ranch hands work on expanding the barn. The baby babbled happily, grabbing at Emma's hair, and Emma laughed, kissing her daughter's soft head. Margaret joined her, carrying a basket of vegetables they'd harvested together. "Happy anniversary." "Thank you. Hard to believe it's been a year." "Hard to believe it's only been a year." "You've lived a lifetime since you came to Red Rock." Margaret set down the basket, touched Hope's cheek gently. "You've built something remarkable here, Emma. Not just a family or a ranch, but a life. A real, true life. We built it. All of us." Emma looked at the house, at the garden, at Colton working in the distance. "It's not what I expected, not what anyone expected, but it's ours. That's all that matters in the end, isn't it? That it's yours, built by your choices, sustained by your love." Colton noticed them watching and walked over, wiping sweat from his brow. "Are my 2 favorite ladies conspiring against me?" "3 favorite ladies," Emma corrected, jostling Hope, who giggled. "And yes, we're plotting your downfall. We've decided to take over the ranch entirely. About time. I've been waiting for you to realize you could run this place better without me." He pulled Emma close, careful of the baby between them, and kissed her forehead. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Hayes." "Happy anniversary, Mr. Hayes." They stood there in the garden, the 3 of them, while Margaret discreetly retreated to give them privacy. Hope cooed and grabbed at Colton's collar, and Emma leaned into her husband's strength, feeling the solid reality of everything they'd built. "Do you ever regret it?" Colton asked quietly. "Choosing this life, choosing me? You could have gone to Austin with Margaret, could have had an easier path." Emma looked up at him, at the face she loved, scarred and weathered and beautiful to her. "Not for a single moment. This path, our path, it's exactly where I'm meant to be. Even with all the struggle, all the judgment, especially because of that. The struggle made us strong. The judgment taught us what really matters, and all of it, every hard moment, every small victory, led us here." She shifted Hope to her other hip, took Colton's hand. "You told me once that I was still a virgin, and you said, 'Not for long, sweetheart.' Do you remember?" He laughed, the sound warm and rich. "I remember thinking it, not saying it." "Well, you were right, not for long. But it wasn't just about my virginity. It was about everything, my innocence, my fear, my smallness. You saw who I could become, and you chose me anyway, not despite my flaws, but with them. And that's why I chose you back, why I choose you every day." Colton's eyes were suspiciously bright. "I love you, Emma Hayes. I loved you when you were a frightened saloon girl with too much pride and not enough hope. I loved you when you stood up to a mob and solved a murder and proved everyone wrong. And I love you now, standing in our garden with our daughter, having built a life I never thought I deserved. You deserve this. We both do." Emma rose on her toes, kissed him softly. "We chose each other, Colton, and we keep choosing each other. That's the real love story, not the rescue or the scandal or the dramatic moments. Just the daily choice to stay, to fight, to build something real." Hope chose that moment to grab both their faces, bringing them together with baby strength, making them laugh. And there, in the garden Emma had planted, on the ranch they'd fought for, with their daughter between them and their future stretching bright ahead, Emma and Colton Hayes held each other close. They'd started with scandal and suspicion, with a virgin's cry and a cowboy's vow. But they'd built something stronger than gossip, deeper than judgment, more enduring than any obstacle Red Rock could throw at them. They'd built love, real, tested, chosen love, and it was forever.